Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Are you just going to leave like that? Kate asked. Mom. The daughter nodded. Mom sobbed. However, she quickly pulled herself together. Daughter. Once again, she began to persuade. I understand. You're going through a huge grief, but maybe you shouldn't give up everything. And just like that, go to the middle of nowhere. Kate sighed. Just yesterday, she and her mom had talked about it. And by the end of the conversation, she seemed to accept her daughter's decision to be alone for a while. And today she was trying to talk her out of it again. Kate said, trying to keep her voice as soft as possible. Please, let's not bring this up again. I've made up my mind, and you know I like to be alone. And I work better that way, especially with nature, fresh air, clean water, organic food, and all that. But it's the middle of nowhere, screamed the mother in despair. It's not a backwoods. The daughter said cheerfully. There's cell phone service, but no running water or sewage, the woman said caustically. Kate smiled, probably for the first time since Peter's death. But it's not for nothing that you sent me to Grandma Sophia's house in the country every summer when I was a child. I know how to make a stove. I can chop wood too. So I will be able to milk the cow, and you are already going to have a cow there. Cindy exclaimed in horror. Mom, Kate smiled again. I'm not going to have a cow, at least not yet. Cindy sighed. She realized it was useless to argue with her daughter. She was just like her father. Heaven rest his soul, she's just as stubborn. But she was afraid that if she was left alone with her grief, her daughter would die of boredom. A few hours out of town on the back roads, you can't go to visit, and Cindy can't travel very often. She's got her own chain of stores, clothing stores. You got to keep an eye on them. Well, at least she's got cell phone service. He'll call her as often as he can. Kate, seeing that her mother has completely calmed down, she sighed with relief. She decided for herself that leaving the apartment, leaving the city where their whole history had taken place, was the best way out for her. She would not be able to walk the streets where they walked and sat together in the park on the benches where they kissed, to pass by the registry office where they applied for marriage. But they never had time to confirm their intentions to become husband and wife. Mom was worried that she would be alone in the remote village. On the contrary, there would be time to think about herself, about her life, and of course, to work. Peter understood her in this respect. He always said that work is soothing, but only when it is favorite. Sing and she met when she first came to the drawing circle. Kate was then in her third year of law school. She entered there not of her own free will, insisted Father Michael, founder and owner of the largest law firm in the city. He dreamed that his only daughter continued his business. He didn't care if Katya didn't want to. You're 17. You don't know what you want yet, do you? He said later. Thank you. I'll be talking to most of your classmates. Teeth, gnawing the ground will need to achieve something in this life. And you're all set. When she graduates from the institute, you'll get a job with me. I'll teach you everything. You'll work for 10 or 15 years. You'll gain experience and I'll hand over the firm to you. Kate tried to get support from her mom, but Cindy was completely on her father's side. She herself, many years ago, started out selling down jacket at the market, and now she already owned a whole chain of stores, clothes, and understood what efforts it takes to make your way in this life without support. Except that the daughter, as if not in them went career, prospects of business, she was not interested. However, then to go against the will of her father, Kate did not dare to pass the exams herself and entered the law school and studied there well, closing the session on excellent. But her parents didn't realize how hard her unloved studies were costing her. She felt she wasn't doing what she wanted to do. In the end, she decided that in order not to go crazy, it is necessary to think up a hobby where she will rest her soul. She chose painting. It always seemed to her that the ability to express their inner feelings on the canvas, the highest form of art. A new studio opened just next door to her home. Kate decided that she would not lose anything if she went to a trial class. The class was taught by Peter. When Kate first saw him, her first thought was that he was so young and handsome. The instructor was older than her by only a couple years and looked just like the artist pictured: tall, lean, broodingly sad blue eyes and black, Slightly bobbed, shoulder-length hair. What is the purpose of your coming here? With a smile, he asked Kate at the first class. I don't know, she answered confused, unprepared for such a question. I guess everyone has one. No, objected the man gently, sitting down next to her. Everyone has a different one. Some go specifically to paint a portrait of their mother for her anniversary. Others want to paint pictures that will make millions. Others just spend their free time that way. And you? He was inquisitive, looking at her with his big blue eyes that now seemed almost blue. Kate sighed, thinking that this information was too personal to dump on a stranger. But still, she answered, I need an outlet, an activity that I will do because I want to do it, not because someone made me do it. The teacher looked at her carefully and nodded seriously. Okay, I hear you, Kate. This class was a breath of fresh air for her. It was so nice not to have to memorize laws that had been invented long ago and that didn't even apply in the modern world. To read dry texts, trying to understand and memorize every word, which together add up to something insanely complex and almost meaningless. And doing something creative. Here she just let go of her mind, her thoughts, her control. Peter told her to forget the rules and do what she wanted. Let her not think about color combinations, clarity, lines, proportions, harmony. It's even better to just turn your head off and do what you want. It was difficult, very difficult. The first 10 minutes she hesitantly took a brush and brought it to one can of paint, then to another. It seemed that everything depended on the first stroke she would make. And so it was absolutely necessary to choose the right color and apply the perfect stroke. Then she suddenly raised her head and caught the teacher's gaze. He was looking at her with an understanding smile. And Kate suddenly thought, well, it's no difference. How do I start when it comes to the result? Not to change her mind, she dipped her brush deeper into the first paint she saw and swished it generously across the canvas. The paint turned out to be yellow, and a large, sunny spot on the canvas paid out. But her soul suddenly felt so light. For the next half an hour, Kate did not think and almost did not even look at what her hand was doing, as if it was working separately from her thoughts. She didn't even notice how the class came to an end, and people began to gather around her. What did you make? A forest glade. She heard Peter's gentle voice above her. I don't know, she answered honestly. I hadn't thought about it, and then she shrank back, terrified that he was going to reprimand her for being so careless. She hadn't even listened to what he'd been saying all this time. But to her surprise, the man nodded in satisfaction. You're making great progress, Kate. It's not everyone who can just like that, without any preparation, at the first class, and then relax and start creating. She wrinkled her nose in frustration. Thank you for your support, but create. That's a bit of a mouthful. You can't make out what is drawn here at all, not a single clear line. Peter smiled softly. Sometimes you don't need clear lines to understand what's being drawn. You have 5 minutes. She shrugged confusedly. Of course. Then please stay where you are, and I'll do something. Kate obediently remained seated, and he went to his Albert, put a blank sheet of paper there, and began to draw something quickly, occasionally glancing at her. After 5 minutes, he said, Come to me, please. The girl obediently stood up and crossed the already empty classroom, where there was no one left but the two of them, and approached the teacher. He silently turned the easel so that she could see the whole drawing. This is my portrait, Kate asked in astonishment. It was impossible to be mistaken. Clouds of red, curls bright green eyes, long thin neck. See, he said with a smile. Did you recognize yourself? And yet I didn't make a single clear line. It was true. The portrait consisted literally of a few broad strokes. And yet Peter managed to convey even the expression of her eyes, sad and a little frightened. You're very talented, Kate said. Are you too? He replied. And I'd be delighted if you came again. Of course she did. And not just because she liked Peter at first sight. The time she spent in the studio felt completely different, as if there was a second life here. There was that external outside world where only her shell lived, doing what others wanted her to do. She was studying to be a lawyer, preparing to inherit her father's office. went to visit the families of her father's rich friends with her family. And here for a few hours twice a week, she was immersed in her inner world where she did what she wanted to do. And Peter became her guide. It was like he understood her without words. He would just walk up, look at the drawing, and say what she needed. Every time they stayed after class, it became a tradition that no one had agreed on. It just happened by itself. 3 weeks later, Peter asked her if you wanted to go out for coffee. Sure, Kate replied immediately. She thought the man would take her to some coffee shop, but he had closed the studio. Then they drove around the house where it was located. They entered the courtyard, crossed the playground, and stood in front of the entryway. Peter started looking in his bag for his keys. "Are we going to your house?" the girl asked, surprised. "Yes," he answered simply. Kate realized from his face that inviting a little familiar person to his home. For him, it was simple and natural, and he saw nothing surprising in it. Kate wouldn't have gone with anyone else, but Peter instilled in her a sense of complete security. "Found it," he said, finally pulling out the bundle and opening the door. His apartment on the top floor was very spacious and clean. The girl had imagined the artist's dwelling to be very small, dirty, and crammed with many objects. And this was almost an ordinary apartment. The only thing was that all the objects seemed to be handmade. Paintings on the walls, bedspreads on the couch, clay crumbs, wooden spoons. Wow, Kate couldn't help herself. "You did all this?" Peter shook his head negatively. "You're students, and they're also something friends, something acquaintances." "How nice. It's very beautiful." "Thank you. Come into the kitchen." There Kate sat on the big stove with a Peter-covered blanket. It was very warm and cozy. She watched Peter, with calm, confident movements, pour coffee into a turku and put it on the fire. "You have a very cozy apartment," Kate said. "I'm glad you like it," Peter replied. "It took me a long time to create it. Or rather, it created itself, and it's close to work. Yes, it's convenient. I don't like to waste time on things I don't like. Traffic, for example." He smiled, and Kate cringed after those words. Her whole life, except for 2 classes a week, is spent in things she doesn't like. He set the coffee down and looked at the girl carefully. "What were you thinking?" She shrugged. "I don't know, maybe a little jealous that you live the way you want to live. Everyone lives the way they want to live." Kate looked at his face. Peter was completely serious. "No," she said firmly. "Not everyone does. For example, I certainly don't." He looked carefully into her eyes. "If you were unhappy with something in your life, you would have changed it long ago. What you're happy with, you don't change. That's how it works." Kate felt angry. "What if I don't have a choice? That's what you're thinking. What if other people decide for me?" He smiled again. "If you were in prison, I'd probably agree with you. Though there'd be some who wouldn't. But you're out there with your arms and legs working and your head thinking." Kate, noisy breathing. "You don't know anything. Not about me, not about my life. So tell me calmly," he asked. "I'm not going to tell you anything. But you're the first to start talking about how I don't know your situation." Kate froze with her mouth open. Peter was perfectly calm. "Okay," she said through gritted teeth. "Look," he nodded and sat back in the corners of his beautiful blue eyes. Kate discerned a hold back from the typewriter. What made her even more angry? "I come from a rich family with a strict father. All my life I've been controlled and told how to live my life. I never had a choice. You're of legal age and capacity. You're in control of your own body and mind. So, just because you're now responsible for yourself and decide how you live your life, where and with whom you want to tell me I can disobey them." He shrugged. "And that's for you to decide." "Here we go. What do you want me to decide for you?" Kate stopped talking, because that's what she wanted to say. "I'm sorry. Suddenly, I'm putting too much pressure on you. You have to make these decisions on your own. It's just that I'll never forget how you came to your first class. How battered, lost, timid, like a stray kitten who padded to the doorstep on a rainy day. Thanks for the comparison. No offense, none taken." They drank their coffee in silence. Then Kate said she had to go. She said a polite goodbye and left. Peter didn't hold her back, but all the way home she thought about what he'd said. Can I really live my life without my parents telling me to? Do I really listen to them? Because I want to. Kate's first thought was to take offense and never come to class again. She even missed one and felt how sad she was that day. So, pulling herself together for the next class, she went. It was as if Peter was not surprised by this. "Forgive me," the girl said, when the two of them were alone after class. "For what? Did I act like a stupid girl?" "No, you acted like a person who wants to change her life, but is afraid." "You're right, as always. Don't blame yourself, please. Your class is an outlet for me. I'm very happy about it. But do you like to live your life as an outlet? Your life is more than 2 art classes a week. I'm afraid I don't know who I'll be if I'm not who I am now." "Whatever you want. I'm thinking about it," Kate admitted. "And you do with a smile," he said. "Don't think about it." Kate smiled. She thought back to that as she drove the car over the broken roads. How had Peter changed her life then, from the first time she'd met him? After talking to him, it was the first time she'd thought about what she really wanted to do, and it wasn't painting knitting. A month later, she picked up a hook and then needles for the first time. Teaching her was a good friend, Peter Jenna, a lovely 50-year-old woman, a former labor teacher who now made her money knitting. At one point, Jenna quit school, started traveling, and started knitting on commission. Kate succeeded almost immediately. Oddly enough, she had such a hard time with law school that she convinced herself that she had no talent. Peter was the first to convince her that she was talented, as he praised every class. And Jenna became the second. "You're just catching on," her mentor told her admiringly. "It's too early to jump to conclusions." Embarrassed, Kate joked, "I have 30 years of teaching experience," confidently said the woman, "and a lot of time to understand what the student is. I don't need to." "In that case, I'm very glad," said Kate. "Just more practice." Kate knitted every spare minute she had, but she didn't give up her lessons with Peter. He taught her to see colors, to combine them, and it helped in knitting. When she knitted her first cardie, she decided to come to the university in it. That same day, 3 girls from the course, and one lecturer asked her where she bought it. Kate honestly admitted that it was her work and got her first order. "Don't forget to do social media," Jenna urged her. "It's the best tool in our business right now." Kate learned how to do that too. More orders came in, but there was no free time left, and the girl made a decision. She dropped out of school and told her parents about it. Here she was to experience the most difficult conversation in her life. "Are you crazy?" shouted the father. Mom tried to soften the situation. "So we'll solve everything," she said. The girl laughed. "I'll talk to whoever I need to talk to, and she'll be reinstated mom." Kate said calmly, "I won't go back to university. I don't want to be a lawyer, and you don't want to inherit my firm." Dad asked snidely. "No," coined the daughter of the knitting sweater. "It's not a job," said Mom. "It's what I want to do. And if in 6 months you get bored with it, then I'll do what I want to do at that time." "That's enough. I can't listen to this," screamed my father. "Either you go back to the university or you'll never see my money again." "I'm fine with that. What's wrong with you?" My little girl asked Mom, "Why did you suddenly change so much?" "I just started doing what I want, not you," answered the daughter. Her father kept his word and the big expensive apartment she lived in. Kate could no longer afford it. She started looking for a new one, which she told Peter in between. "You can stay with me," he said. Oh, Kate was embarrassed. "Thank you. That's a very generous offer. But that will sort it out okay." "Yeah, but I'm uncomfortable." "Why?" "But it's hard to explain to myself." "Why? You have to say no. You like to make things up, and this is easy." I offered. "You can say no if you don't like me or if you don't like the apartment. If it's fine, you can say yes." Of course, she agreed and never left him again. Kate drove through the countryside when she was in high school, going to her mom's grandmother Sophia's mom's grandmother's house every summer. But she lived more like a prosperous village, with many sturdy new houses with freshly painted shutters and high gates. Every family kept cows, chickens, pigs. Many had horses. There were rarer kinds of animals, sheep, goats, turkeys, rabbits, ducks, and of course, huge vegetable gardens with massive greenhouses and whole fields of potatoes. Sophia Kate recalled her childhood with warmth. Grandmother, despite the large farm and, accordingly, a large amount of work, was always cheerful, and gladly connected her granddaughter to village life. And the girl did not mind. So life in the village Kate was not afraid. Except that now the streets she was driving through did not resemble at all that prosperous village in which Sophia lived. It seemed to them at best one house out of 3 lived here. Kate had already noted the terrible road. Even her trusty cruiser hummed angrily, unhappy with the terrain. Honestly, I thought the situation here was better, sighed the girl, turning to Gulp, a heavy black cat with white paws and a white spot, an even circle of belt giving its right eye. Hinted disgruntledly. I know you're tired, replied the landlady. I too already want to get out of the car and stretch my legs. Meow. Yes, I also think that there are about 50 people living here. Mom is right. We should have at least seen the house before coming here. Or we'll arrive and there's a hut on chicken legs. The cat looked expressively at her mistress, but did not continue the dialogue. Kate sighed and looked at the realtor's explanatory note. You'll drive through the village on the main street, straight ahead without turning off. Your house is at the very end. You'll recognize it by the white palisade and the 3 tall apple trees. Kate continued her monologue. It's either green or blue, and most of them have blue paint at all, and the blossoming apple trees would obviously be noticeable. The house was located at the very end of the village, and apparently at least 2 houses before it were uninhabited. At least, that was the conclusion that could be drawn from the broken glass. But Kate and Adriana's future home looked pretty decent, just like the photo in the ad. A large, bright kitchen, a bedroom and a room from which the girl planned to make her office, a small vegetable garden and a bathhouse. After looking at everything, she was satisfied. One can live joyfully, she said to the cat, who was squinting contentedly in the warm May sun. But immediately Kate remembered Peter's apartment with sadness and warmth. She herself hadn't realized at what point they had become a couple. It had happened that way, naturally, as if they had known in advance that it would be like this. And although Kate had no such experience, she felt no awkwardness or fear. It just went the way it went. A few months later, Cindy called her daughter and suggested we meet. Invited her over for dinner, suggested Peter. What was Kate surprised about? Why? He shrugged. I need to meet your parents sometime. Yeah, she stretched out uncertainly. Except I'm scared. Why? I'm afraid they were expecting something else. A rich fiancé like that. Let me talk to your mom and she'll change her mind. Peter, as always, talked her into it. Cindy was being very nice. She looked a little worried, though. How did you like your dinner, Mom? Kate asked. It's great, thank you, answered Mom. Peter did all the cooking. Are you a great cook? Cindy turned to him already. I'm very glad Kate is going out with you. She looks absolutely happy. I'm happy with her too. And I'm even happier to have met you. Cindy smiled strainedly, and Peter continued. But in spite of the lovely evening, you seem tense, as if you wanted to tell us something unpleasant. You're very perceptive, Peter. Mom's worried, Kate asked. Did you really want to say something? Mom nodded. Yes, Dad, he's very ill. Michael has changed a lot because of his illness. He became softer and kinder, happy to meet his daughter and her fiancé. He accepted them and the last months of his life. The father and Kate were very close. Yes, Kate said, turning to the pro that, oblivious to her mistress, stretched blissfully on the porch. Dad would be shocked to see him where I live now. At least it was possible to live in the house. There was plenty of work to do. There was no telling how long it had been since anyone had lived there. And Kate spent the rest of the day sweeping windows and floors and arranging furniture. By evening, she was moshing so much that she just wanted to lie down and go to sleep. The girl like a bed with clean linens for style, and taking the cat with her went to bed. Sleeping in the fresh air was good, the smell of blossoming apple trees. Birdsong could be heard. Kate could feel herself falling asleep. Lately it had been difficult, but tonight she was tired, or it was the country air. She fell asleep quickly. She was awakened by a soft creak, opening the door. At first she thought it was just the shutters creaking, but then through the open door came a stream of moonlight. Jenna. The girl opened her eyes weakly and saw a tall male figure in the doorway. From fear, she could not say a word. The man stepped into the house and looked around. Then he, trying to enter as noiselessly as possible, approached her bed. Kate realized that there was no light on her face, and so she just tried to stay still and not move. The man came even closer, and then she saw his face. Kate even stopped breathing. The house felt cold. The man stood beside the bed, and then silently walked out, carefully closing the door behind him. The girl could not regain consciousness for a long time, but after a while fatigue took its toll and she fell asleep. In the morning, Kate couldn't understand what it was about the night before. Of course, if she thought logically, it could only have been a dream. But everything seemed very real. The moonlight, the cold air, the sound of footsteps. She was quite sure that Peter had come to her in the night. He looked a little different, though. It was hard to say exactly, because she had seen him at night with her eyes half closed. But still she could see some difference. He seemed quiet. He had stubble on his cheeks and short hair. But Peter didn't look like a ghost or a dead man. Am I really thinking about this? Kate asked sadly, pouring milk for the cat. He looked at her calmly with yellow eyes and said nothing. Kate looked at his fluffy white paws and a thought occurred to her. Footprints. If this wasn't a dream, there should be his footprints left behind. Near the porch, part of the space was covered with sand. The girl stepped outside as she was in her pajamas and began to scrutinize the sand and gasped in amazement. I could make out a few boot prints in the small patch of sand that lay around the house. Judging by the size of the men's, I wasn't dreaming. Kate said quietly. There was no doubt left. Someone had been in her house during the night. Could it be Peter? He had proposed to her while her father was still alive. It was at the last family dinner. Dad was happy, even gave them his blessing. Michael died. A week later, they decided to postpone the wedding for at least 6 months, and they didn't want to make a lavish celebration. They wanted it to be just the immediate family. The celebration was to be held outdoors in June. All of Peter's friends were ready to help with the organization. Who will be from your family? Kate asked. I suddenly realized that I hadn't met any of them yet. Peter thought to his parents and his younger sister. True, she is studying abroad, but I hope she will come to the wedding. I'd love to meet them, Kate said. Okay, he replied. The sister announced that she would be coming to the wedding. The bride didn't have time to meet Peter's parents, as they had gone to stay with their youngest daughter for a couple of months. Peter and Kate announced that they would be bartering. Wedding. Each of the guests, instead of a gift, had to prepare some part of the event as desired: bake a cake, bring flowers, decorate the arch and tables. The celebration was outdoors. Because of this, Kate and Peter were virtually hassle-free. These months Kate remembers as the happiest months of her life, although she knew in her mind that nothing in their lives would change. She wanted to get that coveted status. Wife. The dress she took her time choosing. From time to time she went to the stores, but there was nothing suitable. Then one day she decided to take an unfamiliar route and turned down a small street. There stood a store with a modest sign vintage, and right in the window she saw a thin, long, white knit dress. It fit perfectly. Kate looked at herself in the mirror and thought that this was how she had imagined herself all her life. At that moment the phone rang. Kate picked up the phone and heard the most terrible words of her life. Peter was dead. He's dead, Kate thought. So he certainly couldn't have come to me tonight. But the footprints are real. So it was a living material person. However, how to find out who it was? Kate decided not to torment her head with useless torment and to get on with the house. Yesterday, she had time only to clean up a little, so as not to breathe dust. In general, cleaning always had a calming effect on her, like putting things in their proper places, throwing away what she didn't need, cleaning the windows. It also put her thoughts in order. Kate turned to the sip who was sprawled out on the windowsill, blissfully basking in the rays of the May morning sun. I can't stop thinking about what happened at night. The cat lazily opened his right eye, and in the middle of the white spot, a yellow lake appeared for a second, which immediately disappeared because he swallowed. Decided that his attention to the hostess's words was not worth it. Understandably, Kate continued, furiously rubbing the wall above the old electric stove from old grease strips. That it wasn't Peter. But I saw the footprints, so it's at least a living person. He swallows comfortably, lies on his back, exposing his furry belly to the sun. And it looks a lot like Peter. Maybe I just dreamed it up in my sleep. Anyway, I should probably walk around the village and meet the locals. Maybe I'll find out something. At that moment, the phone rang in the silence of the old village house. The familiar ringtone sounded as alien as if it were in a movie about the great Roman Empire. A warrior on the battlefield drew a pistol instead of a sword. Kate looked at the screen mom. But who else? "Good morning, Mom." She said, "Hello, how are you?" "Good morning." "I'm fine. How are you? How was your trip? How was your sleepover?" "I'm fine. Thank you." As Kate's house slips into view, you glance around the room, mentally noting that there's enough work for another week. Everything's perfect, just like the picture. "I'm just putting it in order now. That's great." "When you come to visit, girl," laughed Mom. "I just left yesterday. I gotta get settled in, at least clean up. There's all the trash to take out, things to take apart. And I have to work. If you need help with money, just say no, Mom, I have money. And where am I supposed to spend it? I don't think there's even a store around here." Oh my God. Kate immediately realized she'd made a mistake. For a mother, the store is a necessity. "I'm kidding." In a chipper voice, she said, "There's a store. How would they live so far from the city without one? I just haven't been there yet. Don't worry about it. I just said that on purpose to tease you." "You're kidding," Cindy said with feigned seriousness in her voice. But it was clear that she believed it and had calmed down. And Mother's heart ached. "It's all right, really. Mom, don't worry. I like it here. He's lying in the sun, warming himself. I'll feed him now. Won't he catch mice?" Kate shrugged. Then she realized her mother couldn't see her and answered the phone. "I don't know. He probably doesn't know what mice look like. He'll be scared." The mother also sighed. "I didn't think of that." "All right," Kate said, "I'm going to go explore the village. Thanks for calling. Have a good day." And Cindy's daughter hung up on you. But Kate still managed to hear her sigh before she did. Worried, she said, turning to the cat. He had already heard the familiar phrase, "I'll feed you," and now he was looking at her with wide-open yellow eyes. "The hint is understood," said Kate, and went to the refrigerator, took out a packet of power food, and generously laid it out completely. "Enjoy your meal," she said to the cat. "I'll have to see what they have on sale here, or I'll have to switch you to a natural diet." By lunchtime, Kate decided it was time to take a break. She really needed to see the village. She was going to live here for a long time, and it would be useful to know where to buy food, where to go for medical help. And in general, I wonder what kind of people live so far from civilization. In general, all this information should have been found out when she was choosing a house. But then it did not interest her. In fact, after she learned about Peter's death, nothing in her life interested her. For a long time, Kate couldn't believe it had happened. It seemed as if she had fallen into a long, endless, nightmarish dream, and for some reason she couldn't get out of it. After a while, she couldn't even remember what she had been doing during those weeks, although she had even participated in organizing the funeral. Talking to Peter's parents, his sister. She had her moms or Jenna with her all the time. "Kate, do you need to make a change in your life?" As her mentor said to her, "You're not living, you're existing." "I don't know how to make it light," Kate replied to her friend. "Of course, I realize that my current state is not normal, and I even want it to stop. I want to start living again, to enjoy the spring sunshine. But it's as if I don't have the strength. It is as if I am lying under a thick layer of water, through which colors, feelings, warmth cannot reach me. What depresses you the most is when you lift your head and look around." Suddenly, Janet asked her. "Memories," Kate replied. "Everything in this town reminds me of Peter. Everywhere I go. It seems as if he and I walked down every street, sat on every bench, ate at every cafe." My friend frowned. "Maybe you should go away somewhere for a while. It'll be summer soon. Live in a warm, cozy place where you've never been before. Maybe that would help you." "You know," Kate said, "I like that idea. I'll think about it." I'll write to my acquaintances, Jenna said. I have them all over Russia. I think we'll find something suitable for you. At first, Kate agreed to this option, but then she realized that she wanted her own place, her own little fortress, where she would be nice and quiet. Then came the idea of a house in the village, small and cozy, with a real stove, that there was a porch on which in the warm days she will take out a chair, rocking chair, sit in it and knit. Just like the old maid in 19th century English novels. Such thoughts even made her smile, and she began to study real estate listings. She found this house quickly. The realtor was so excited that Kate realized the house had been for sale for a long time. And apparently she was the only buyer. You just have to be honest with me, she warned the realtor. The remoteness from the city, the bad roads, the remote village, the lack of amenities. None of that scares me. On the contrary, I want to get as far away from civilization as possible. She smiled broadly. Then you are exactly at the right place. You won't find a more remote place that you can reach by car. It's an old village, the kind of village they call dying. It used to be kind of big, but now, as with most things, there are almost no people left. Young people are leaving for the city, only old people are left. The woman suddenly fell silent, apparently afraid that she had painted too much of the merits of the remote village. Kate smiled. That's exactly what I need. I'll take it. Maybe you could at least look at the pictures of the house. On closer inspection, the village didn't look as bad as it had first appeared when she'd first driven in. Well, yes, there are empty and run-down houses, but there were some that were clearly inhabited. There's flowers on the windows and curtains. There was a decent store here too, but she didn't see it yesterday. Not surprisingly, though, it differed from a normal house only in the absence of a fence and the presence of a small porch. Stepping closer, Kate could make out the old fallen sign for store number 1. It made her smile for some reason. She remembered that her grandmother had had a store like that in the village when she was a child. The same Wendy had worked there for all the years Kate had been visiting Sofia, and it was as if she had never changed over the years. She greeted Kate with the same phrase. Well, boogers my lemonade or ice cream. Actually, that was the only thing Kate liked in the village store: lemonade in brown glass bottles and Rashki's ice cream. It was of 3 kinds, plain white with nuts and with raisins, and also bread. Crisp and flavorful bricks with a hard golden crust and a soft core. The rest of the goods were there as if they had been there for 20 years, and only my grandmother bought them. For Kate, however, there was only lemonade, bread, and ice cream. She pulled the battered wooden door open, expecting to be plunged back in time. But what she saw inside was in stark contrast to the wooden house and the dilapidated, weathered sign. Of course, it was far from the city supermarket here, but still it was quite a modern store with a good repair, a bright hall, and a chic assortment. Good afternoon. A woman's voice rang out. Can I help you? Kate saw a tall, slender black braid and a girl dressed in denim shorts and a brightly colored t-shirt with a character from some anime. Hello, Kate said. Honestly, I just came by to look. I didn't expect it to be like this inside. The girl smiled. My name is Alice. This is my store. Nice to meet you. Kate, this place is great. Thank you. You must be the girl who bought the abandoned house on the edge. Yeah, that's me. Oh, that's great. I was just on my way to visit you today. I was surprised to hear from Kate. Why? Alice shrugged. But it's not like there's very little fun to be had here. Kate smiled, and I'm one of them. The shopkeeper nodded seriously. I think the main thing this month, unless Clara's goat gets its horns stuck in the fence again. Kate laughed. Alice, she was definitely enjoying herself. I hope I can still surprise you and compete with you. Alice stretched out. I'm sure you will. Maybe a coffee. Was the offer unexpected? Now Kate asked, confused. Well, yes, but you're working. The girl waved her hand. Oh, come on. I don't see any lines around here. What if someone calls? And let's use the first name. I don't think we're that far apart in age. I'm 24. Aha, said Kate. And she already owns her own store. Great. I'm 25. And already have my own house in the back country, Alice parried. They walked to the back of the store and out the door. Kate thought they were going to end up in a back room or some small service area and sit down at a small table. Alice would put the kettle on and pour instant coffee. It's flashbacks from childhood again. Sophia and her granddaughter once had tea like this in the back of the Wendy's store. The back room was indeed, but Alice walked through it without stopping and opened another door. They stepped out onto a cozy back patio. There stood a fairly modern wooden table, 2 wicker chairs. A coffee machine took up a good half of the table. "You surprise me more and more, Alice." That's all Kate said. "There's more to come," she replied. "But tell me what there is to tell. Why does a young, beautiful girl buy a house in an abandoned village, hiding from someone?" Alice squinted comically. "No," Kate laughed. "More like running away from either herself or the past." "I see." Unexpectedly serious, the shopkeeper said and put a cup of fresh emergency coffee in front of Kate, taking a sip and appreciating the good quality of the beans. Kate said, "And I am much more interested in why a young, beautiful, intelligent girl opens such a nice store in an abandoned village. Does it really make a profit? Wouldn't it be easier to move to the city?" Alice smiled. "It does. It's not such an abandoned village. Besides, there are several other villages and towns around. They're all coming to me too. It's easier than driving a few hours to the city. I go there twice a week. I often bring something to order. So the store is paying for itself. Why don't you leave?" Alice shrugged. "Maybe I will, but for now I'm happy here. I have a husband, children. Did you have a fiancé?" There was a pause. Finally, Alice asked, "You don't want to talk about it yet?" "I don't want to, I'm sorry." "That's why you moved away." "Oh, come on. You can tell me when you're ready. In the meantime, ask me anything you want." Kate smiled. "Tell me about this place. Anything you think you need to know. How old is this village? Who lives here now? Where's the nearest post office, school, garden, and such? What sights and places of interest are there?" Alice: "All right, that one, of course, is not at Sarist Village, but it has enough attractions of its own." She wrinkles her forehead funny. "I don't know exactly how old the village is, but it's a few hundred years old for sure. It was founded by old believers, old believers." Kate interjected, "That's from when there was a church split." Alice nodded. "At least that's what I've been told. What I bought, I sell for, as my grandmother says. And they used to be the only ones who lived here, but then they all got mixed up. Now, of course, there are a few families left, but I don't think anyone follows such strict rules anymore." "Wow," Kate exclaimed. "This is a real old believer village. It's going to be a real old school village," Kate promised seriously. "You probably think there aren't many people living here, don't you? Well, at least there are a lot of abandoned houses, right? But what you can see when you drive down the main street is only a small part of the village. It's actually very big. Many of the buildings are hidden behind the forest, and people live there too. Why is that? It would be more logical to cut everything down. I don't know. Maybe you like it secluded. Maybe you were too lazy to cut down the trees. Maybe it had some kind of protective function. I can't tell you exactly. It just happened. It just happened. And here you have a village practically in the middle of the woods. Realtor told me there's hardly any young people here, just old people. Well, that's half true. I'd say they don't put kids in school here, and the kindergarten has long since closed. The nearest one in the village is a couple hours away. So those young families that sometimes form here, when they plan to have children, do they move to the city or to this very village? There are enough old people, yes. But there are also people who are in their 50s and 40s. A few of our age, a lot of singles, widows, widowers. Just people who, for whatever reason, haven't found their other half. Aha. That's what Kate said to the singles village. Alice laughed, but that's basically it. There's only about a dozen families here. But we all live together and help each other. What do the villagers do for a living? What they can do. Their own vegetable garden, farming is a must. Cows, horses, chickens, ducks, pigs, goats, rabbits. Who likes who? Someone goes on a shift to the city or generally to the north somewhere for a month, 3 months, or even 6 months. Old people live on their pensions, farms and help from children from the city. And of course, what nature helps mushrooms, berries, nuts. There is plenty of this goodness. Kate listened mesmerized. It was as if she had fallen into a wonderful fairy tale, where a modern coffee machine was combined with mushroom picking and natural farming. Wow, she could only say to Alice as if she remembered something. You'll probably need to fix something, take it apart, saw it down, and so on. That's what the son of old Nina is doing at Frank's. Kate asked. Aha, they're an interesting family. Everyone wonders how she had him and by whom. She's old enough to be his grandmother. Frank, I think, is not even 30 years old. Maybe he's a little older than us. She's almost 80. Wow, you don't say. No one knows who his father is. My mom told me that Nina was always weird. She came from a strict old believer family. Her parents never let her out of the house. Their house was deep in the woods, and she hardly ever came to the village. They were all shunned. They were inhumane. My aunt was. You even talk differently now, Kate said with a smile. Like in the old days, what do you get? Alice asked proudly. Kate nodded. It's for the best effect, so to speak, an immersive experience. Where was I? That she wasn't my people for sure. Anyway, she didn't have any fiancé. Either parents did not allow, or simply no one wanted to take a strange, half-wild girl as a wife, and not particularly pretty. So the four of them lived together, Nina's parents and her older brother. And then something happened. I've already forgotten what my parents told me, whether it was a fire or someone brought chicken pox or rubella to the village. And they were all unvaccinated. Anyway, both parents and Nina Mike's brother died. All at once? I think so. She was probably in her 50s at the time. Of course, nobody expected her to do anything interesting, and suddenly she packed up and went to town. Wow, why? Who knows? Probably looking for her destiny or something. Anyway, she was gone for, like, a year or so. And she came back pregnant. Careful? Kate asked. No, with a baby. With Frank. Right. She moved back into her house and went about her life as if nothing had happened. That's the story. Aha. And never told anyone what she did for a year. But Alice was looking off into the distance. She's not exactly a straightforwardly outgoing and pleasant woman. I guess there weren't too many people there to ask, so she was the only one raising Frank. Aha. He's a good kid, never hurt a fly. And he's very good looking, by the way. He can do everything with his hands, but it hurts. He's a little standoffish. Stop using that word. Kate laughed. Alice rolled her eyes. All right, withdrawn, quiet, doesn't talk. Is that more to your liking? That'll do. The girls laughed. Kate sighed. She didn't want to leave, but she'd been sitting here for a long time already. Alice had work to do, and she still had a lot to do at home. She got up. Thanks for the coffee, Alice. I'm really glad I met you. I think we're going to be friends. I'm more than sure of it, replied the shopkeeper. You certainly don't need to buy anything, Nadeau. I already saw that you have good cat food in Phil. In addition to the cat food items, Kate picked up 2 more bags. Alice turned out to be a good salesman. If you don't like it, you can get your money back. Really? She said goodbye. Come back often. I'd love to see you. At the end of the conversation, they exchanged phone numbers. Kate went home, deciding to put off seeing the rest of the village until later with the bags. It wasn't very convenient. Alice's stories about the old believers and the hermit houses hidden in the woods didn't make her want to walk around alone. There was a dead mouse lying on the porch. You can't beat your instincts. Kate said philosophically, looking at the cat, unperturbed. It seems that everyone is going to surprise me today. The cat snapped and shoved his face into the bag. I fed you before I left, Kate told him sternly. So you'll have dinner with me now. She took out the bread and cheese she had bought. She didn't feel like cooking sausage, but a couple of sandwiches she'd like to eat now. All the food was fresh and tasty. I like Alice more and more chewing, Kate said and explained about Adriana. You don't know her. I'll introduce you later. The next week passed without a hitch. The house and yard were now in order. At least everything that was within her womanly power, Kate had cleaned. Of course, there was still a lot of old junk that she just put in one big pile. I'll have to ask Alice if anyone has a cart to load it all up and take it out. The girl thought. Cindy called every day. She seemed to be getting used to the idea that her daughter wasn't coming back to town. At least not anytime soon. There was less and less worry in her voice. She listened eagerly to what Kate had to say about village affairs and enjoyed discussing with her daughter the events that had taken place in her stores. Jenna also called several times. They had arranged for her to come for a weekend visit in a couple of weeks. Kate realized that she missed her friend very much. She wasn't going to the city yet. She brought everything she needed with her, and Alice's store provided her well with groceries. Having finished with the house, the girl went back to work, so some of the orders postponed. So there wasn't much time left to finish them by the deadline. Then she would have to go to the post office in the village 2 hours away and send them. But now she had nothing to do all day long anyway. In the morning, she would make breakfast, feed, swallow, take her knitting and go to the porch there and spend the whole day in a chair, sometimes taking breaks. No one else came to her at night, and there were no new footprints around the house. Kate almost thought she was imagining it. But somewhere in the back of her mind, she was still sure that what had happened was real. She was just thinking about it, finishing a long, thin, almost weightless summer dress. When the phone rang, it was Alice. "Hi," she said cheerfully. Kate smiled. Alice's voice alone was enough to lift her spirits. "Hi, it's so good to hear from you. How are you settling in? Do you need any help?" No thanks. I just finished today. I just got back from the city." Alice said cheerfully. "Oh," in a sleepy voice, the shopkeeper continued. "And by pure chance, I saw an absolutely amazing wine in a liquor store there." Kate laughed, taking the hint, offering to share it with you. You could even say, "Ask to visit you." "I'd love to. I just need to unload, and then I'll come straight to you." "Oh, that's great. I'm gonna make us some dinner." "Kate, you're adorable." "You are. Waiting, studying." Kate finished her work. She left her dress on the chair and went into the house. She decided not to be fussy and made chicken and spaghetti and a fresh vegetable salad, just in time for her to finish. Alice came in. "Hi," she shouted excitedly. She opens the door and, waving bottles of wine. "Not even two." Kate is surprised. "We're going to have a long evening," parried her friend. "Sure, if you don't mind." "I don't mind. By the way, what's the cutie?" "Did I see on the chair?" Alice asked. "That dress is yours." "I knitted it to sell." "You did?" "Uh-huh. Wow, you're talented." Kate smiled embarrassedly. "Oh, thank you. If you want, I'll send you a link to my profile. You can check out some of my other work there." "I will." Kate set the table and took out glasses. The girls sat down. Alice raised her glass to introductions, she said. "Probably the best thing I've ever had in my life." Kate replied reciprocally. They drank. The wine was delicious. A pleasant weakness ran through their bodies. I felt warm and relaxed. "Did you decide to get me drunk to find out what happened to my fiancé?" Kate asked. Alice smiled. "Well, that included that. Of course, I didn't think we'd get to that so quickly." Kate shook her head and took another big sip. "I'm ready for it. Maybe it's the wine talking, but it seems to me that you and I have gotten pretty close, even though we know each other. It's nothing, but not close. So close." Philosophically, Alice remarked, pouring into the glasses. "That's what I think too, at this point." He jumped on Alice's lap. "Wow, who's that handsome boy?" She peered between the cat's ears. He stretched out his paws contentedly and fell silent. "He likes you," Kate said. "But I've been used to handling animals since I was a kid." "I think I'll start," said Kate. Alice nodded seriously. Kate took a deep breath and began to talk. To make it easier, she started out talking about her parents, about her father, about doing what he wanted her to do. Then she met Peter, and her life changed dramatically. Alice listened without interrupting and only stroked slowly, swallowed. Kate told both about the wedding preparations and the death of her fiancé and her condition. "And here I am," she finished with a smile. "Yes," sighed Alice. "The story is certainly a tough one." Kate grinned. They took their glasses and drank almost simultaneously. What are your plans now? Alice asked. To live alone in an abandoned village and knit fabulous dresses. Kate smiled sadly, but for now. Yes, I'm quite happy with that now. Okay then, but in a way, I'm glad too. If you hadn't come here, I'd have died of boredom. Kate laughed. I doubt that. You strike me as the kind of person who knows what she wants. Alice shrugged. Perhaps you could tell me about yourself, Kate asked. You know everything about me now, and I know very little about you. Alice shrugged, but my biography is not that eventful. But I guess there are a couple of interesting moments. I live with my grandmother now, and in general I spent most of my life with her. And your parents? The girl smiled sadly. They are local too, but they always thought about my future, and that's why they worked in the north almost all their lives. So for as long as I can remember, one or both of them have been gone. They still work there. Do you miss them? I'm used to it now. But when I was a kid, sure. But again, they did everything for me. I graduated from a prestigious university in Boston, a certified entrepreneur, so to speak. Is that how you got your fancy store? That's right. And why did you decide to come back here? Alice sighed. That's a tough question. I guess I want to figure myself out, to experiment, to be in some kind of isolation, I guess. Boston is a very big city. After our village, the number of people, houses, and transportation put pressure on me. But here everything is familiar and comfortable. Of course, I'm not likely to live here forever. It turns out, Kate raised her glass. We've both found our temporary home here. That's how it works. It was late in the afternoon when Alice went home. Kate went out to see her off. Why don't you stay at my place? She suggested it. I'm worried about how you'll get there. Alice waved her hands. You have nothing to worry about. Even though we're almost in the forest, there are no animals here, and none of the locals can touch me. Still, call me when you go. My friend suddenly stopped and looked thoughtfully at the huge mountain of garbage. We should take it out. You've made the place look so beautiful, and it's ruining the whole view. I know, Kate sighed. I just don't know who to turn to. Alice nodded. Don't worry. I'll ask Frank tomorrow. He'll do it. Thank you. You're welcome for now. Thank you for the lovely dinner and company, and you. Kate's back in the house. She feels it inside. For the first time in a long time, something warm and pleasant. And it wasn't because of the wine and the hot dinner. Oddly enough, but the next morning Kate didn't even have a headache. It must have been all the fresh air. Habitually, she started her day by talking to the cat. Past 2, sat on her bed and hypnotized her mistress with big amber eyes. It's still early when you're hungry, managed, muttered Kate, but got up. She fed the cat, had time to eat breakfast herself when the phone rang. Hi. Alice's voice was as cheerful as ever. How are you feeling? Hi. Great. You okay too? Listen, I talked to Frank. He said he's coming over to your place, soon to take out the trash. Oh, Alice, thank you so much. How much do I owe him? Nothing, Alice. Kate sighed. Why do you have to be like that? Okay, then how much will I owe you? Her friend laughed. Not at all, Kate. We work things out in a mutually beneficial exchange, and we usually exchange favors. When Frank or I need something from you, we'll ask for it. Don't hesitate. And if we don't worry, you pay good for good. Live here for a month and you'll see how it works. Kate sighed, but she had no strength to argue with her friend. Okay, whatever you say, Kate. Alice suddenly hesitated. Here's the thing. Yeah, it's got to be something. No, that's not it. Look, don't be surprised when you see Frank, okay? Why would I be surprised? My friend sighed. You'll know when he's here, won't you? The main thing to keep in mind is that he's a very good, kind man and not stupid at all. He's just very withdrawn and silent. Don't be surprised if he won't talk to you or answer your questions. If you had ever seen Nina, you would understand. Kate thought for a moment, trying to digest that, and then said carefully, okay, I hear you. Thanks for the warning. I'll try not to pester him with conversation. Alice, all right, girlfriend, come on. Half an hour later, Kate heard a knock on the gate. She looked out the window and saw the very real horse band into a cart. Wow, the girl odd. So much for the Old Believer village in all its glory. She hurried out of the house, opened the gate, and froze. In front of her stood a tall, thin man with short black hair and a small beard. Blue eyes studied her intently. Kate felt herself getting sick. "Peter?" Quietly, almost inaudibly, she asked. The man raised his eyebrows in surprise. Then he shook his head negatively, pointed his finger at the cart, then at the mountain of garbage. "Frank?" Kate asked. He nodded. The man looked definitely alive and very much like her late fiancé. "He was the one I had the other night," Kate suddenly realized. "Did you come at Alice's request?" she asked aloud. He nodded again. "Come on, I'll help," Kate said. Together, they loaded the garbage into the cart. Kate couldn't take her eyes off Frank. He looked a lot like Peter, not in the usual way. There are similar people of the same type, like height or eye shape. Kate recognized all the features of her fiancé in this man. And his hands, and the dimples on his chin, and the shape of his pea, and his ears, and the shade of his eyes. Yes, he had a different hairstyle, clothing movements, facial expressions. But the resemblance was striking. "Were you the one who came to my house at night?" Kate asked. When I first arrived, she noticed how the man tightened his lips and lowered his eyes. "Wouldn't you like to talk about it?" He remained silent. The loading was finished. He sat down in his seat in the cart and took hold of the reins. Kate realized that he was about to leave. "Thank you," she said. Frank nodded faintly, pulled the reins, and the horse went. Watching the cart move away from her house, Kate thought she needed to talk to someone right away. She heard the phone ring at home. This time it was Jenna. "Did you remember that I'm coming to visit you this weekend without any preamble?" she asked. "Of course," Kate said cheerfully. "I'm looking forward to it." It was immediately easier on the soul. After all, what was the big deal? Well, Frank looks like her late fiancé. So what now? That's the way it is in life. Maybe they're not that much alike. It's just her grieving brain seeing what it wants to see. The next day, Kate ran to the store. Alice had just finished serving a small elderly woman and turned to her friend. "Hi, so how did it go with Frank?" Kate shrugged her shoulders normally and said he was very talkative. Alice laughed. "He doesn't talk at all. He only talks to people he knows well. When you get to know him better, he'll start talking to you." Kate lifted her lips, but still decided to admit, "I'm not sure I want to get to know him better." Alice frowned. "Something's up." Kate felt her palms suddenly sweat. "Long story. How's your time?" Alice circled his hands around the empty store. "Plenty of it, as you can see. Drinking coffee, yes." As they each drank a cup, the aroma of the drink wafted out. Kate told her friend in detail about what had worked out the first night. Alice said thoughtfully, "It's very strange. I'll talk to him about it." "You don't have to." The friend shook her head violently. "Very much so. I've known Frank a long time. And believe me, breaking into sleepy girl's house is not his style." "Do you have any thoughts on that?" Kate is silent. How hard was it to say it out loud when he looked just like your fiancé? "Yeah, to be honest, I don't really have an idea. Just that it's an incredible coincidence. But you know, I'm not a mystic. But I do believe that all chance meetings are not coincidences." "How did you and I make our joke?" "Kate?" Alice nodded seriously. "Ours with you in the first place. But it's no coincidence that you bought a house in our village in the first place. I don't know what will happen or how this story will end, but something will happen." Kate felt that, despite the warm weather, her skin was covered with goosebumps. A couple days later, Kate heard a knock on the gate. When she went out to open it, she saw Frank. It startled her so much that she involuntarily recoiled backwards. He gingerly raised his right palm, as if trying to say he wasn't a threat. Kate froze in place, not knowing what to say, what to ask, and why ask if he wouldn't answer anything. But the man suddenly opened his mouth and spoke. His voice was like Peter's too, only a little lower and muffled. And he spoke slowly, as if he rarely spoke. "I want to talk, to explain everything, to explain everything." Kate asked in surprise, "Why did you get into the house?" He fell silent. Strange. But Kate didn't feel like he was a threat. There was something almost childlike and defenseless about him. He stood so submissively in front of her now, doing nothing, obviously waiting to see what she would do next. "Come into the house," she said at last. "We'll have tea." He nodded as if he had been expecting it. At home, Kate poured the tea and set the candy on the table. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed that Frank was slowly turning his head around, looking around the house. Taking the mug in his hands, he said, "Now the house is alive." "Alive? Don't you get it, Kate?" "Yes." "Did you make it that way?" The girl shrugged. "But I live here." He shook his head. "No, it's not just that. People can live in the house, but it will still be dead." Frank fell silent and stared sadly at a single point, as if he were immersed in a memory. "Was there something you wanted to tell me?" Kate reminded him cautiously. He looked at her a little surprised, as if waking up from a dream. "That's right. I'm sorry, Kate. I'm not used to talking much. It's going to be a little difficult." She suddenly felt ashamed and embarrassed, and even a little sorry for Frank. If he really lived all his life in this village with a horrible, oppressive mother, and not very good at communicating with people. Well, he's going through a very difficult time. Maybe we should support him. "Frank." Kate slowly reached out and gently placed her small palm on his big hand. "I understand. Take your time. Tell me as much as you feel comfortable with." He looked at her gratefully and inwardly. Kate shuddered, noting how much his gaze at that moment was like Peter's. "Many years ago, a very nice man lived in this house," Frank began. "He was very close to me." He suddenly reached into his pants pocket, pulled out a small stone statue, and placed it on the table. "May I?" Kate asked. The man nodded. "What fine work," said the girl, taking the statue in Fox's hands. "Yes, you made it." He shook his head, then with a visible effort answered. "My teacher, John. He lived in this house." Kate guessed. "Yes. I was told no one lived here for a long time. He died over 10 years ago." "How old were you then?" 17. "So he's the same age as Peter." Kate made a mental note of it. "You can do that sort of thing too." She decided to switch to you because you seemed a little intimidated by Frank. "I do, but not as well as he does." "Do you mind if my story is long?" "No," Kate replied. She stood up and put the kettle on. "It'll be cozier that way." Frank nodded. "I grew up without a father. My mother loves me very much, but she couldn't teach me what a man needs to know. And John has become almost like a father to me." He fell silent again and looked around the house. "My mother was against my socializing with anyone but her, so I went to Ivan Afanasievich secretly. He had neither wife nor children, and he was happy to teach me everything he knew." Frank smiled, looking somewhere in space. And Kate suddenly pictured him as a little curly-haired, blue-eyed kid, like Peter in children's pictures, being taught to fashion animal shapes out of stone. She smiled. "And when I was 17, he died. He had a heart condition. I miss him very much." Kate thought how hard it must be for him to tell this to a stranger. "I'm sorry," she said. "Thank you." "You're very good, Kate, you're me." "You don't know me at all." He shook his head. "I know it doesn't take long to realize what a person is like. But we've gotten way off topic. What subject? Why did I break into your house?" Oh, the transition was sudden, and she was a little embarrassed. "I didn't know the house had been sold," Frank said. "I went to a neighboring community for a couple days on business. I drove past Ivan Afanasievich's house at night and suddenly saw light in the windows. I know I did something stupid, but for some reason I suddenly thought I might see him there." Kate nodded. She didn't think it was silly at all, for she had had similar feelings herself. Hadn't she looked for his face in every passerby for the first time after Peter's death? Hadn't Kate, when she saw Frank at night, considered the possibility that it might be Peter? "I understand you," she said calmly. "Go on." He nodded gratefully. "You know, there are such strange nights, especially in spring and early summer, when everything seems magical. And you seem like a smart, grown-up person. Suddenly you start to believe in miracles and imagine that everything is possible." Kate swallowed. He was saying exactly what she herself had recently felt. Frank continued, "I was driving at night. Through the village alone, the moon was shining. And suddenly I saw that at the window of Ivan Afanasievich's house, where no one has lived for 10 years, came to life. I even imagined him sitting at that table and doing something. So I went into the house, and there you are. Yes, Kate said quietly. I realized the house had been sold. I was afraid I might scare you, so I left. And then when I asked, why didn't you answer? He sighed and looked away. I was ashamed. I would have avoided you as long as I could if it wasn't for Alice. She talked to me and convinced me that it was right to tell you everything. Kate touched his hand again. Thank you. It means a lot to me. Thank you. You didn't have to listen to me at all, so I'll say it again. You're a very good person. So are you. You don't know me. Who said it doesn't take a long time to understand a person? Frank smiled. If you need any help, you can come to me anytime. Thank you. I don't know if there's anything I can do to help you. But if there is, you can come to me too. He's up. You've already helped me a lot. I don't have any friends except Alice. Kate didn't know what spurred her on, so to speak, but she uttered it nonetheless. Maybe I can be your friend too. I'd be very happy if that happened. The conversation with Frank had left Kate with a strange impression. Of course, she was relieved that the whole mystery was out in the open. There were no ghosts, and the real Frank turned out not to be a strange, silent maniac, but quite a pleasant young man. She enjoyed talking to him. Perhaps they could actually become friends, but it was as if there was still some mystery. Kate couldn't believe such a coincidence. Frank seemed sincere, though. The rest of the weekend passed without much incident. Kate continued to make the house cozy. She worked hard. And then Friday night, Jenna came over. Well, you've got a friend, Jenna said as she got out of the car. I've been waiting for bears on the road. Kate laughed. I haven't seen one yet. Well, it's not night yet. Come on, help me get the bags out. I told you I have everything. Kate was indignant. Jenna just waved her off. The two of them carried everything into the house in a few trips. You're not going anywhere until you've eaten everything, Kate said. Feed your bears while you're at it. Jenna, tell me what interesting things are going on with you. We're setting up house now. I'm working. Kate showed her latest work, which Jenna praised very much. The student has surpassed the teacher, she said. Oh, come on. I just have tons of free time. The friends had a delicious snack with the ones Jenna had brought. Poured a glass of wine and sat on the porch. I have more amazing things to tell you, Kate said. Jenna raised her eyebrows, listening attentively. Kate told everything from the first night in the village to the conversation with Frank. Jenna listened without interrupting and seemed to take it very seriously. You know, she said. When Kate finished her story, I don't really believe in mysticism. I said to Kate too. Wait a minute, Jenna continued. I don't believe in mysticism, but I do believe in fate. I don't think anything in this life happens by chance. You must have met this Frank in your life for some reason. The other question is, why? Maybe it'll make it easier for you to get over losing Peter. Maybe it'll help that guy in some way. I don't know. I've been thinking about it too, but I can't think of anything. Well, you don't have to. Time will work itself out. What do you think about this amazing resemblance? Jenna wondered if there was a resemblance. You know, I have an interesting idea. Call Frank over for dinner tomorrow night. And my new friend, I'd love to meet them. I'd love to see if he looks that much alike. Jenna sighed Kate. You're a genius. Her friend shrugged and took a sip of wine. Live with mine, girl. Alice happily agreed to come over for dinner. Wow. Oh, Kate. Here you are bringing a spark to the life of our dull village. Alice. Kate finally managed to get a word in edgewise with her friend. Can I ask you to call Frank too, because I don't know his phone number. Where does he live? No, he doesn't have a phone, answered her friend easily. He lives not far from me. You don't know where I live either. Don't worry, I'll call him. Kate was worried. It seemed as if her two worlds, the old and the new, would collide today. She was especially worried about how Frank would feel. He hardly even knew her, and now Jenna would be there. A complete stranger to him. She was afraid he wouldn't come. However, by the specified hour, Alice and Frank were standing at the gate. One glance in the light was enough for her to realize she saw the resemblance. Nice to meet you, said Frank, and held out his hand to her. She shook it gently and smiled very pleasantly and sincerely. Dinner went easily. They chatted on some general topics, told light about the village. She told in return how she had traveled to visit friends in the north. They talked a little about how Jenna and Kate's friendship had started and casually mentioned Peter. "He's my fiancé," said Kate. "He's dead." "I know," Frank said suddenly. "Kate, I'm sorry," said Alice. "I'm the one who told you everything." "Everything?" Kate asked again. "Yes," confirmed Frank. "I guess I was supposed to know about it." Kate felt her cheeks turn red. "Of course you have a right to know," she said. "But I was afraid to tell you, afraid that you would think I was prejudiced against you because of it." "Kate," Frank said calmly, "I'm used to people thinking I'm weird and treating me accordingly. I told you I don't have any friends besides Alice. That's what Jenna said. Luckily, we've sorted all that out now. There are no more skeletons in the closet, and it's safe to be friends. I suggest we drink to that." She raised her glass. The others followed her example, and the atmosphere at the table lightened. A few days later, Kate was going to go to the neighboring village. She had to send the finished goods to the customers. Frank had to go there too, to pick up some medicine for his mother. Kate offered to give him a ride. He agreed. "Where to pick you up?" asked the girl from Alice's store, and walking up. "There's a road all the way to the end. The penultimate house with red shutters. That's where Alice and Grandma live. And the next one I signal and I'll be out." The next morning, Kate went to look for a really narrow road up from the store. However, her car could easily pass there. As she drove, she saw only 2 dwellings along the way. And then for a long time it was just woods. Kate even began to think that she had gotten the wrong road. But just at that moment she saw the very house with the red shutters. And even farther away there was a small house surrounded by a high dumb fence. No flowers or colors were there. Just wood, like a dwelling from a horror movie, Kate thought. No wonder, having lived in a house like that all his life, that Frank had grown up so withdrawn yet kind. She was walking, as agreed, on cue, and saw a face appear in the window. At first she was even startled. The face was gray-wrinkled, and angry old woman looked at her Dennis Black with gray eyes. This must be Fiddy's mother. Soon he himself came out as well. The face in the window immediately disappeared. "Hello," said Kate. "This is your mom." "Yes," replied Frank. "I guess I should have come out and said hello." "No, you shouldn't. She doesn't really like people." "Well, let's go then." At first she thought Frank was in a bad mood. But the farther they got from the village, the more cheerful he became. He would tell her what places they were driving through, how best to get to this or that neighboring village, and what there was to see in them. "If you want, on the way back, I'll show you one beautiful place." Kate looked at his happy smiling face and glowing blue eyes, and felt a warmth come over her. "I will," she said. The neighboring village they reached after 2 hours was more like the village where Kate had spent her childhood at her grandmother's house. The more populated living forest was not there. Cars traveled along the wide roads. The post office was empty. Only a pretty young worker was sitting there. She must have been glad to have a job at last. She quickly helped Kate with the parcels. After the post office, they stopped at the drugstore and bought everything they needed for Frank's mom. "Do you need anything else?" Kate asked. He thought about it for a moment. "I have to buy something at the store," Frank remembered. "Wait for me outside. I'll be quick, okay?" He was in the store less than a minute and came back, carefully wrapping something in a black heavy bag. "Let's go." Smiling contentedly, the guy said, "Drive on the way back. I'll tell you where to turn." They drove back in silence for a while. Then Frank asked to turn left. "I hope you're not a maniac." Awkwardly, Kate joked. They drove up a very narrow, steep path some more, and then the man asked to stop the car. They walked up the path for another 15 minutes until they were at the top of a small hill. "That's beautiful," Kate said. From here they had a view of the swift, clear creek and its banks covered with lush green moss. They sat down on a large flat rock warmed by the sun. Frank opened the black bag he had brought with him and held out its contents. "Kate, ice cream," she exclaimed. "A white cone with raisins like from childhood." Frank smiled. "You told me you ate them at your grandmother's house in the country. They probably don't sell them anywhere else now," Kate said, licking at the white dome. It tasted just like when they were kids. They sat on a rock in silence, eating ice cream and admiring the view. Kate thought that she had already forgotten this state of calm and inner warmth. Would I be just as happy if Frank wasn't so much like Peter? She thought, but immediately pushed the unpleasant thoughts away. Look, Frank told her quietly and pointed downward. Kate followed the direction of his hand and saw a small red fox drinking from the stream. The girl had never seen wild animals so close before. She was afraid to move. The small predator cried calmly into the water, and when she was done, lifted her muzzle up and looked at the people watching her, then waved her tail and disappeared into the woods. That's amazing, Kate could only say. Frank laughed softly. I can show you a lot more if you want, he said. And then, for some reason, he lowered his head in embarrassment. I'd like that very much, Kate said. It had been almost 2 months since Kate had moved to the village, and somehow, when she woke up early in the morning, she realized that she felt completely calm and satisfied. It was as if she had found her place in the world. She liked the village nature, liked summer, her home meows swallowed, habitually jumped on the bed, and saw that the mistress opened her eyes and good morning to you. Kate said, There are presents from you on the porch again. The cat stretched out on the blanket. Now he left 1 to 4 dead body cars on the porch every day. Kate even complained about it to Alice once. I don't know how to wean him off it. The friend shrugged. I guess I'll break everyone someday, and that'll be the end of it. Basically, it's not that bad. My neighbor had a cat. He used to put his prey on the pillow next to his face. It was horrible. Oh, huh. Strangely, you've reassured me. My friendship with Alice was also going strong. The girls occasionally went into town together. They even spent the night at Cindy's house. Kate's mother promised that she would come to visit in return, but so far she could not spare the time to leave her stores. But Kate was not bored in the village she was already used to. She said hello if she saw anyone in the store. She was also used to her at the post office, where she went once a week to send orders. What's 10 bags to prepare again? Fun, asked the young Betty employee. Only 6 this time, Kate smiled at her. I'm subscribed to your page, Betty announced cheerfully. Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. I was thinking about ordering a sweater for fall from you. Sure. The girls discussed the details of the order and parted satisfied with themselves. On the way back, Kate suddenly decided to stop by the place where she and Frank had eaten ice cream. She was afraid that she would get lost alone and would not find it. However, she remembered the way. She sat down on a rock. It was as warm as the last time. There were no animals near the stream, but she decided to sit and wait anyway. And somehow she didn't notice herself dozing off. Kate, there was a quiet, affectionate, and very familiar voice above her. She slowly opened her eyes. Next to her on a rock sat Frank. Hello, said Kate. How did you get here? I went for berries. He showed me a full bucket. I was just passing through. I thought I'd take a break, sit down. I see you asleep. Is that a nice coincidence? I'll take it. I'll give you a ride home. As they were walking to the car, Kate asked how you were doing. What's new? I haven't seen you in a week, he shrugged. Yeah, nothing much, really. I'm still working on berries and mushrooms while it's in season. And it's nothing new with you either. They drove in silence to the village. Near the store, Kate wanted to turn up to Frank's house, but he suddenly said, Get me out here, please. What Kate didn't understand was why he pressed his lips together. And then he said, Mommy will be upset. Why doesn't she really like me hanging out with anyone? She's afraid I might be influenced. What are you talking about? Frank sighed. I know it sounds weird, but my mom is a very complicated person. I'm all she has. And for some reason lately, she's afraid I'm gonna leave her. She's afraid someone's planted that thought in my head. Then he suddenly blushed, but he pulled himself together and added, She's afraid someone will take me away from her. Wait a minute, Kate clarified. Are you saying that your mom is jealous of you of me? I'm sorry, Frank repeated without looking up. I was going to ask you to dinner tomorrow. But he was already out of the car and walking toward the house without looking back. Kate sighed and leaned back helplessly. Suddenly, she remembered that she needed to buy some feed, swallowed, and walked into the store. Hi, her friend greeted her cheerfully. Hi, why so glum? Oh, I'm fine. So, Kate, is it written all over your face? Go ahead and say it. Kate sighed. You can't hide anything from that Alice. Frank doesn't seem to be hanging out with me anymore, she said gloomily. Her friend's eyebrows went up. Did you do something to offend him? No. So then Kate couldn't help but snicker. His mom won't let him. She expected Alice to back her up. But surprisingly, her friend only sighed heavily. I understand your resentment. But remember, I told you that Nina is a woman with a difficult character. I remember, of course, I saw her in the window, not the most pleasant woman. But I didn't know Frank was a mama's boy. Kate saw her friend frown as if she'd heard something unpleasant. It's not that simple, Kate. I live next door to them, and I've known her for a long time. Nina's a manipulative woman. I think she's been in over her head for a long time. She's obsessed with her son. She's got nothing in her life but him. She never has, never will. And I don't think he had anyone but his mother until recently. He's more or less friends with me now. And the fact that he's talking to you is a huge step. Kate sighed. Maybe you're right. It's hard for me to understand it yet. Please don't jump to conclusions. Okay, I won't. Back at home, Kate was pensive. She kept trying to imagine what was going on in that gray wooden house. What was that ugly woman like when she was young? What had happened to her after her parents had died, when she had gone to the city for a year and returned with a small child? Though she felt that something in the story confused her. With these thoughts, she went to bed, having previously taken with her resentment and swallowed. However, it was as if he sensed the mood of his mistress, so he resisted for a short time and comfortably settled down beside her blissfully purring. Kate didn't even notice how she fell asleep. Usually people can't tell the difference between dream and dream. Only when they wake up do they realize that it wasn't real. But for some reason, this time she immediately realized that she was asleep. The girl sat down on the bed. The cat lay quietly beside her. A large full moon shone through the open door, and Kate was not at all surprised when Peter walked in. She had no doubt that it was he and not Frank. The difference between them was obvious to her now. Hello, he smiled. Hello, Peter. Kate felt no bitterness, no desolation, no joy at seeing her lover. Only calmness. I'm glad you're doing well, the groom said. Are you too? He came to the bed and sat down beside it. Did you come to say goodbye to me? Kate asked. You could say that. After all, we didn't have time to do that. I didn't want to say goodbye to you. I know. I didn't want to either. But it just happened. Sometimes I think I worry too little about you, Kate admitted. It's only been a few months, and I hardly cry anymore and go on with my life as if nothing had happened. Peter smiled. You did the best thing you could have done. If you had suddenly asked me how I would want you to behave after I died, I'd answer, carry on living. Kate felt tears streaming down her cheeks. But it didn't hurt, just calm and good. I miss you so much, I know, but you will still have memories of me. You will still have Jenna, and now you have Frank. Kate was embarrassed. Yes, every time I talk to him, I think of you. He smiled. Don't, Kate. It's like you're making excuses for me dead, for hanging out with another man. Don't, he's just a friend to me. I don't blame you for anything. He's a good man, but there's something eating at you. Isn't there? I can't quite explain it to myself. It's a remarkable resemblance between the two of you. Yeah, and you know who we can talk to about it? Who? Excuse me, Kate? You know, he stood up. He stroked the gulp that kicked everything under his arm and poked me in the ass. Goodbye, Kate. You'll be all right. Goodbye, Peter. Kate woke up and quickly sat up in bed. Everything looked as usual. The door was closed, the moon was shining through the window, and the cat was sleeping next to her. Only her heart was racing and her pillow was wet with tears. What was that? The cat, already accustomed to the monologue of the mistress, indifferently turned over to the other side. Who am I supposed to talk to? Clearly not with Frank. Nina Nahaj. The mere thought of her made Katja shudder. Without solving the problem, she talked herself out of it and fell asleep. Only in the morning her phone woke her up. Hello, daughter. Mom's voice sounded. How are you? I'm fine. Mom, why are you calling so early? There's something going on. Cindy sighed. Peter's mom called me, and she wanted to pick up some of his stuff as a keepsake. I didn't want to bother you at first. But then I thought you should decide what to give her. It's okay, Mom said Kate. I was just about to go into town. It's the day after tomorrow by the time I leave. I'll be there in the afternoon. Good daughter. Some of the things, including those that belonged to the groom. Kate didn't take them with her. She left them in her parents' big house in her room. Well, I guess she dreamed about Peter for a reason. She had only seen his mom for the first time at the funeral. It was strange to meet her fiancé's parents under the circumstances of his death. She didn't really remember them, though. Kate didn't even have their phone numbers. Frank's mom was a nice little woman. Anna smiled softly with her blue eyes, and Kate suddenly remembered Nina's dark, angry, dry eyes. I'm glad to see you, Kate said affectionately to the woman. It's good to see you, too. I'm sorry to disturb you. It's just that I suddenly thought we had almost nothing left of liver. Oh no, it's okay. It's good to see you. They went into the room. Kate began to carefully put things out. Peter's mom carefully went through clothes, paintings, sculptures. His favorite shirt, she said. Back in 9th grade, they bought it. Kate smiled. He wore it once a month, said it was too old to wear too often. The woman smiled. What kind of paintings did he have? She said. Talent. Together, they went through the paintings. I'll just take one. Anna took the painting in her hands. I don't remember it, Kate said thoughtfully. It certainly didn't hang in our house. I would have remembered it. It was of a little family, a mom, a dad, and a baby. They were standing at the very bottom of the picture and were depicted as if from a distance. It was only visible that their hands were reaching upward, and most of the picture was occupied by the night sky, in which a bright comet stood out the brightest. It was as if the family members were addressing it. It also seemed strange that the comet's tail was closer to the ground than the comet itself, as if it were flying upward from the ground instead of downward. Anna sighed. It's in memory of his fraternity brother. Kate didn't understand. Oh, he didn't tell you? No, she sighed. It's an old story, of course, but a very painful one for all of us. The thing is, Peter wasn't born to me alone. He had a twin brother. Kate clarified, feeling her throat drying up. Yes, something happened to him. He was kidnapped. By who? When the woman shrugged. We never found out. It happened at the maternity ward when the babies were all in the general ward, separated from the moms. And that's where it was stolen from. There's a theory that a nurse did it. She was kind of a strange woman, and she disappeared after my son went missing too. But not my kid, not hers. Never found. You know, there were no security cameras in a regular hospital back then. What a nightmare. Yeah, we told Peter about it when he turned 10. He was very impressed with the story. I remember he was scared for his little sister for a while. Wow, Kate's mind was pounding all over the place. Anna sighed. What can I say now? It's been so many years. The only thing I hope for is that he was taken in to be raised and nurtured. They had some other, more horrible purpose for women. Kate didn't know whether to speak of her hunch. No, maybe it's just a coincidence. I can't alarm her with my guesses. I'll check it out first. They talked very warmly, exchanged phone numbers, and Kate promised that she would come to visit Peter's parents in a week. After that, she went to have tea with Cindy. Mom, she asked, what do you think? It's important to know the truth. Cindy raised her eyebrows. What kind of truth? I'm just saying, just hypothetically, you found out some secret. The event happened a long time ago, decades ago, but it's still important to the people involved. Would you tell a daughter? What a question you ask, Mom sighed. I'll have to think about it. They had time to drink a large mug of literate tea. And then Cindy replied, I suppose if I were in that man's shoes, I'd want to know the truth, even if it had been 100 years. Thanks, Mom. Do you want to tell me what the secret is? I'm not sure yet. All right then. Kate drove home full of thoughts. Inside, she was convinced that the mystery that had tormented her for months had been solved. Of course, she should talk about them, but how could she do that? She could just send Kate away or pretend that she didn't know what she was talking about. And it's even scarier to think what will happen to Frank. How will he take the news? Will Kate thank him for the truth? You're gloomy again today, a friend said to Alice. She stayed at Kate's to feed and swallow. And judging by the satisfied look on the cat's face, she was doing her job very well. "There's an occasion," said Kate. "Tell me about it." Originally, Kate had not intended to share it with anyone. But now she suddenly felt she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. Alice listened without interrupting, only her eyes got bigger and bigger. When Kate had finished, she told Kate, now it was clear what was clear. Yes, everything. Take looks at least. Frank Black Hair is blue-eyed and Sima doesn't want for eyes and her hair seems to be blonde. They were when she was young, and she's too old to give birth to him. Alice, that's not proof yet, but the friend is only annoyed. She waved her hands. Yeah, wait, she also never talked to anyone. Never left the village after she came back with the baby, like she was hiding. Maybe she just didn't like it in the city. Yeah, that's why the police are looking for her. And Frank? Kate asked. I mean, he must have been immunized. He went to kindergarten through high school. Alice shrugged. I don't know about vaccinations. I don't think he went to kindergarten to school. Yes, he did. We had one in the next village. I was the only one who graduated. Well, he's got his papers. She must have registered him as her son. Kate? I don't know. I'm just sure she stole him too. I'll have to ask her myself. You want him to come with you? But we have to wait until Frank is out, or she won't say anything in front of him. Kate sighed happily. I'll ask him when he's going to go berrying, and you'll come. That's where we'll make it work. The two of us can do it together. Nena, she's almost 80. You make it sound like we're going after a bear. Alice sighed. You'll see, Nina will be worse than a bear. It didn't take long to find the right opportunity. A day later, Alice called her friend under the ride. Frank left, just parked in front of my house. I realized I'll be near the house with the red ones with them already, told excited Alice. Let's go, yeah. They approached the gray house. And Alice resolutely put her hand somewhere between the boards of the fence near the gate and opened the gate, she explained. Maybe we better not call her unexpectedly. And now you're barricaded and you can't get it. They went through the courtyard. Kate noted to herself how neat and tidy everything was there, all the tools under the awning laid out on shelves. They came to the front door. Alice knocked quickly on the door. It's Alice. She resolutely opened the door. Kate sighed and followed her. Inside, everything was very simply furnished, and there wasn't a single bright-colored object. There was only the gray, almost black color of old wood in the four walls dragged and the floor, wooden tables, chairs, a sideboard hung with wooden dishes on the walls, a large cast iron pot on an old Russian stove, taking up almost half the house. What do you want? A hoarse, gruff voice sounded, as if it were a man's. Kate only now saw that the far side of the house was separated by dark blue curtains. It must have been the bedrooms. That's where Nina quietly came out from. Kate felt goosebumps run down her neck. Despite her age, Frank's mother looked imposing, of medium height, wearing a black dress and a black scarf with dark eyes. Her face was covered with a thick network of deep wrinkles. Her hands looked like the dried roots of an old tree. Good afternoon. Nina said hello to Alice. The old woman in response only shook her lips, not taking her eyes off Kate. Hello, said the latter. I don't know you. Nina finally answered. Quiet. My name is Kate. I'm a sim. They want to shake, lips, and immediately interrupted her. Why have you come here to see my son? After those words, it was as if she looked like a strange mixture of birds of prey and a spider. Her sharp nose stretched forward, her eyes staring as if they wanted to tear her apart. Krichkova and hands clutched into the back of the chair. No, said Kate resolutely. We came to you. Here Nina was surprised and wary. What could you possibly want with an old woman? To talk, said Alice. We will sit down, Nina did not equal. The old woman nodded reluctantly. The girls sat down. She too sank heavily into a chair. The thoughts in Kate's head raced haphazardly. Yesterday she had been preparing, imagining this conversation, but now it was as if she had forgotten everything she wanted to say. Fortunately, Alice came to the rescue. She began without preamble, with all her characteristic directness. Frank, that's not your son. Nina slammed Kate quietly for a second, and it seemed that fear flashed in her eyes. but she immediately pulled herself together with a contemptuous grin on her face. "What are you talking about, girl?" Alice nodded calmly. "You stole it from the maternity hospital 27 years ago when you worked there as a nurse." Lies. Kate flinched, not expecting such a powerful voice from an older woman. "Frank is my son and mine alone." It seemed she was about to get up from the table and throw them out. But Nina continued to sit still. "And Kate said I know Frank's parents. His mother is still grieving the loss of her son. I'm his mother," stubbornly repeated Nina quietly, and after a pause added, "especially since she still has a second son. He died," Kate said, "a few months ago. And now she wants to take my Fedchenko." She got angrier and shook her head desperately. "No, he's mine. He should always be mine. I've never had anything in my life, and no one has ever loved me, not my father or my brother. No man had ever looked at me, and then I saw him. There were two of them. Why would she have two identical sons? It was a sign that one of them was going to be mine." She looked into the distance with unseeing eyes, and a smile suddenly appeared on her face. It didn't even make Nina look any younger and less scary. "I was not going to collect anyone. I just stood next to the beds and thought, why someone has two children at once, and I have none. I looked at them. One was sleeping and the other suddenly opened his eyes and looked right at me. I reached out my hand and wanted to pet him, but he suddenly clung to my finger and wouldn't let go. I realized it was a sign that I would die if I left here without him." "So how did you get out of the hospital with a newborn baby?" Alice asked. Nina shrugged her shoulders. "Just did it late at night. I know what time the guards go to bed, though they shouldn't by rule, but from 1:30 to 4 they usually plow through. I waited until the babies were fed, put to bed. The nurse left for rounds in a neighboring ward. There was a shortage of them then, so one was working for two at once. I went over and took Frank. He didn't even wake up. Where did you go with the baby? Home? I took my breast milk with me. There was some precious stuff in the fridge and all the baby formula I could find. You know, all sorts of things for the baby. I came home, quickly packed my things, and started thinking about what to do. It is clear that when they find out that I did not go to work, they will immediately guess everything. I was living in a dorm room from the hospital. And by some miracle, I remembered that not far from my dormitory, there is a post office, and the car that delivers parcels, including to our village, leaves very early at 4 o'clock. I ran there in a hurry and got there in time. The driver asked me where I was going. I named the village, which is about 10 kilometers from ours. He said he was going to the village at the most. I agreed. I asked him to drop me off on the road. On the highway, Alice wondered. It's about 15 kilometers from there to the village. Nina shrugged indifferently. I was young and strong then. The most important thing is that Frank was with me, and there I went. I don't even remember that it was hard. I just walked and walked. Kate, shocked, remained silent, and Alice continued her questioning. Didn't they ask questions in the village when you suddenly appeared with a small child? Did the old woman shrug her shoulders? Who needed me? Well, they scratched their tongues, saying that a crazy old maid from the courtyard of the Old Believers had brought the child into the underground. And then we went on with our lives. New gossip arose, there was silence, and Kate decided to break it. And you weren't going to tell Fyodor the truth. Nina shook her head. Only if before you die you don't have to wait so long. A familiar voice sounded from the open window, and a moment later Frank himself walked in. Nina quietly turned pale. What did you hear? She asked. Everything is calm, answered her son. I forgot to take the mushroom knife. I came back and the gate was open. At the neighbor's. There's a car parked. I thought it was interesting. I went to the window and realized something unusual was going on. Kate could hardly bring herself to look at Frank. She could see that, despite his outward calmness, he had gone pale and his fingers, gripping the back of his chair, were trembling slightly. Sunny trembling in a surprisingly affectionate voice, Nina said, trying to get up from the chair. Sunny. He shook his head and took a step back. I would have forgiven you if you had told me everything yourself, he said quietly. The old woman froze in place, staring in front of her with an unseeing gaze. And you? Frank continued, looking at Alice and Kate. I thought of you as my friends, Frank. We wanted to start at Alice, but Frank shook his head desperately and put his hands out in front of him, as if defending himself. Don't come near me. That's it, you three. He ran out of the house so fast that the girls didn't have time to stop him. Oh, suddenly, Nina moaned loudly, quietly, and fell to the floor. Kate and Alice rushed to help her. They struggled to lift her up, dragged her to the bed, and laid her down. Kate unbuttoned her collar, her dress opened the windows. Alice fetched water and lost face, neck, chest, old woman. Carelessly called her Alice. How are you feeling? Let's take you to the hospital. Nina shook her head negatively. Get out of here. In an unexpectedly firm voice, she said. But it was Alice Nina who started it. There screamed the old woman. She sat up abruptly on the bed, making her sparse gray hair fly in all directions, making her look even more like an old witch. The old woman's eyes glittered. Let's get out of here, she hissed. And God forbid I want to see you again in my life. The girls hurriedly ran out of the house. Yeah, the conversation didn't go according to Delano's plan, Alice said cheerfully. I'd say we've exceeded the plan, Kate replied grimly. Alice to the circus. There's a feeling, geez, we should go look for Frank. Alice suddenly pulled out her phone and looked at the screen. Oh, it's getting late. I should have opened the store a long time ago. She looked at her friend. Kate waved her hand. Don't worry, I can do it alone. Especially there is one guess where to find him. I'm sure you do. But okay, I'll run then. Call me if you need anything. Kate started the car. She really hoped that Frank would go exactly to the place he had shown her. His car. The girl left a little farther back than usual, afraid that Frank would hear the sound of the engine and leave. She was in a hurry, walked, feeling her heart thumping. She felt ashamed, as if she had deceived him and hidden something important. Kate was also worried that he might never really want to see her again. What would she do then? How to beg for forgiveness? Even though they'd only known each other a few months. Frank is so calm, reliable, and sincere. Already an important part of this new life of hers. He wasn't there on the rock, sitting down by the creek. Kate descended cautiously. She could hear her coming, but he didn't look back. The girl took it slowly, then sat down beside her right on the green cool moss. Frank didn't look at her, but he didn't chase her away or walk away himself either. This is already good, Kate thought. They stared at the water in silence for a few minutes, but then she couldn't stand it any longer and spoke first. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to hide anything from you. I just wanted to check it out first. It seemed so implausible, like the plot of some cheap detective story. At least it was. Before that, it was like my life had no plot at all. Or rather, I'd say it was as if the author had invented me 27 years ago and then forgotten. And all this time, nothing was happening in my life. He finally turned and looked at her strangely until you showed up. I immediately realized that our meeting was not accidental and would lead to something. I walked, agonized, lay awake at night. Kate grinned sadly. I'm sorry I didn't live up to your expectations. Surely you must have thought something good would happen. He smiled. A lot more has happened than I could have imagined. Don't think I'm not as stupid and naive as I sometimes seem. I never thought you were. I suspected something. Certainly the great age difference lacked any sign of outward resemblance. Besides, I'd heard stories about my mother in the village. She never spoke of her father herself. Any attempts I made to find out about him were harsh. And there were times when, except for me, it was as if she had no one to talk to for years. I can't even imagine how you lived. Kate gently placed her palm on his hand. He sighed. I lived normally. I didn't know it could be any other way. What do you think you're going to do now? He shrugged. Am I to understand correctly that your dead fiancé is my brother? Yes, and his. I mean, our parents are alive, and we have a younger sister. He's got a whole family. They know about me. No, I've decided to check with Nina first, not Nina. Then I'll tell you and them if you want to. You've known for a long time. I went to town for a few days to give Peter's mother some things. And I found out by accident that there was a twin brother who was kidnapped from the maternity hospital. That's when it all came together in my head. Frank sighed and rubbed his eyes with his hands. It's crazy, that's for sure. I don't even know what I'm feeling right now. The secrets that have plagued me for so many years have been revealed. And instead of being happy, I just want to stay in this forest and not go anywhere. I understand. But at least now we can understand our communication with you. What do you mean, Frank? He turned away, avoiding her eyes. It seemed to me as if we were developing a special bond. It all makes sense now. Did you see me as your dead fiancé? Kate froze. No, she screamed. You think I didn't think about it? Maybe I was attracted to you at first because of the resemblance. But you have nothing in common with Peter except looks, and I've been hanging out with you because you are you. Frank breathed a sigh of relief. I'm sorry, Kate, I just can't stop thinking about it. Let's go, she suggested. Nina must be worried. She didn't know whether to call Nina Peter's mom now, and that made it awkward. Frank seemed to notice her embarrassment. Let's go. I'm not sure I want to see her right now, but we need to make sure she's okay. If you want, Kate offered, you can sleep over at my place. He looked at her uncertainly. Wouldn't that make you uncomfortable? Not at all, and Swallow will be just happy. He adores you. Frank smiled. Okay, let's go to my place and then to yours. Kate stayed waiting in the car. She was even afraid to imagine what was happening in the small gray house now. Nina would probably sob, begging her son to stay, or cursing Kate, or faking a heart attack. Either way, she won't just let him go. 20 minutes later, however, Frank came out of the gate, gloomy as a cloud. Let's go, he said. Kate didn't ask anything. The two of them. At Kate's house, they felt good and comfortable, as if they had been living together for years. Frank offered to cook dinner, and Kate even had time to work. It was delicious, she said, as she piled on more fried potatoes with meat and mushrooms. Are you a talented cook? He smiled. Thank you. While I was cooking, I was thinking about something. What was it? About my real parents and my sister. I'd like to meet them. Kate nodded. Okay, except I don't know if they'd want to meet me. Would it make their lives better? Kate thought for a moment. I'll try to get them ready. I'm going to visit them for dinner just last week. I'll talk carefully and find out everything. Frank looked at her gratefully. Are you the most wonderful person in the world, Kate? Oh, please. If it weren't for me, you'd be living without worrying about all this. He shook his head. No, we've been over this. Everything happened the way it was supposed to. You talked to Kate about it. To your mother. Frank sighed, not ready yet. Just said I'd come by tomorrow. I don't know. I guess she'll always be the woman who raised me. At the same time, when I think about how much grief she caused my real parents, and how my life would have turned out with them, I don't want to see her again. I don't know what to say, Kate replied. Having you by my side right now is already helping a lot. Swallowed, jumped Frank on his lap. The man smiled and stroked the cat. As promised, the next weekend, Kate came over to Peter's parents' house for dinner. They greeted her very warmly, and the girl thought it was a pity they hadn't met sooner. She had been thinking for days about how to start a conversation, but she hadn't come up with anything. I have a very strange question for you, Kate said. Anna and David looked at each other in surprise. Sure, Kate, ask what you want, said Anna. Are you thinking about Peter's missing brother? For a few seconds, the room became quiet. Then the father said carefully, of course, we talk to Anna sometimes. We try to imagine about him, what happened then, where he is now, how he lives, what he does. And why do you ask about that? Mom asked. Kate took a deep breath and then said, I know where he is. What? Asked David. Tears rolled from the twins' mother's eyes. Is it true? Yes. Where is he? What's wrong with him? My boy, he's all right. He's alive and well. Oh God, Anna. She burst into tears. Her husband rushed to the kitchen for water and gave her a drink, then hugged her. How did you find him? He asked Kate. I met him by chance. I didn't even think he could be Peter's brother. It was only last time we talked that I found out and suspected it. He knows about us. Yeah, I told him. Oh my God, he wants to see us. Yes. Oh, my heart's about to jump out of my chest. When can I see him? I can call, and he'll be here tomorrow. Call Kate, please. The parents got terribly worried. They started calling Peter's sister. It turned out that she had been unaware of the situation and was now also shocked by so much news. From the fact that she had a brother to the fact that tomorrow the parents would see him for the first time in 27 years. Anna and David asked Kate to stay with them for the night. She agreed, and left alone in the assigned room, she called Alice, but a friend asked, "How did it go?" Kate sighed, crying, told Peter's sister everything. She was clueless. "You can bring him over tomorrow. They want to see each other." "Yeah, sure, we'll leave in the morning." Kate didn't sleep much that night. She kept trying to imagine what it would feel like for the parents to find their lost son tomorrow. And how would Frank feel right now? Is he ready to meet them? "Good morning," said Mom. When Kate came down to breakfast, "Good morning," replied Kate. Her father was not in the living room, and judging by the dark circles under the woman's eyes, she had hardly slept either. What time would he be arriving? "They left early this morning. They'll be here in an hour or so." "How worried am I?" Anna paced the room nervously. "Tell me what he's like. My son is my boy." Kate shrugged. "Good, kind, caring. He loves nature. He can do a lot of things. He looks like Peter." Yes, outwardly, it is very strange to see that on the same face can be different emotions, different facial expressions. He has a different gait and gestures. "Oh, that's all," the mother said. After a while, David came down. He pretended that everything was fine, but it was obvious that he was worried. Finally, there was a noise of cars driving by. The parents looked at each other and almost ran into the street. They stopped in front of a car. Alice got out of there and said hello. Then Frank came out. He looked shy and embarrassed. Mommy clapped her hands together. Dad put his arm around her shoulders and shook her. "Hello," Frank said shyly. "Son." I couldn't stand it. Mom rushed forward and hugged him. He gently hugged her back. Dad came up to them too and hugged them both. "This is the picture," Alice said quietly, walking over to Katya. "I'm about to cry too," and I gave the Magnolia girl a look at the running tears. The first to come to his senses was David. "So let's go inside," he said, embarrassed, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. Yes, Anna fussed. "Why are we keeping you on the road?" They went into the house first. Frank looked at Alice and Kate with confusion. Kate took his hand firmly in hers, on one hand, Alice on the other. So they entered the house, holding his hands tightly like three little children who are so supportive of each other. There was no way his parents wanted to let their doomed son go back to the village, even going to go with him. But Frank didn't agree. "I need to talk to my mother," he said. Anna Vasilievna's face trembled. He saw it and added, "I don't know what to call her differently yet. All my life I have known her as my mother, and it takes time for me to accept everything that has happened in the last few days. I'm insanely happy to meet you, but it's all so difficult." Mom nodded. "I understand, son. It's a big surprise for us too." Dad intervened in the conversation as well. "If you need to talk to her, talk to her. Maybe we really shouldn't go there. I don't know what I would do if I saw that woman right now." Alice went home. That evening, it was necessary to open the store in the morning. Kate and Frank had stayed the night at their parents' house, and so now they were leaving alone. "How are you?" Kate asked in the car. "It's hard to say, but I'm really glad we met. They're great people. It seems like I've always known them, but haven't seen them in many years. Like Nena, I was afraid she wouldn't let you go." He sighed. "I didn't want to say where I was going. I pretended I was just going into town. But she seemed to have figured it all out, and she gave me one last hug and told me not to hold it against her. Do you? I don't know if that makes sense right now. It's not like anything's gonna change." That's true. They didn't talk the rest of the way, each thinking about something else. But at some point their thoughts crossed. And each thought how good it was that now he was sitting in the car with a person with whom it was so easy and comfortable. And the fact that they had basically met was the best thing ever. Frank asked me to drop him off at the store. "You don't want people to see what you brought back?" I asked Kate. "Of course, she would be upset about that too," Frank said. "But I also need to walk around a bit, find the words. Will you tell me where you've been?" "Yeah, good luck." "Thank you." Kate decided to stop by her friend's store. She was feeling a bit restless and always cheerful and optimistic. Alice was just the thing to cheer her up. "Oh, they're back," her friend greeted her cheerfully. "Or did Frank stay with his parents?" On the contrary, now went to the strawberries. Alice nodded seriously. "Grandma said she had the light on late last night, though she usually goes to bed early." Probably wondering what's going to happen next now, too. Coffee on. The friends were sitting in the backyard when a loud voice came from somewhere in the back of the store. "Frank, Alice. Kate." They ran towards him. Frank was out of breath, pale. "Mom," he said. Looking at them, with frightened eyes died. It must have been the first time Manic Kate had seen all the villagers at a funeral. There really were quite a few of them. Mostly old people, of course, but there were many sturdy men and women over 50. A few young families and even a 1-year-old baby. Sitting still in his mother's arms for the whole ceremony, Frank's parents had come too. Kate read the silent horror in their eyes as they realized where they had grown up and lived their entire lives. Their second son, Frank, did not cry. He stood silently by the coffin, never taking his eyes off it. He seemed to be thinking somewhere very far away. Having gathered courage, Kate approached him and took his hand. He seemed to wake up and squeezed her fingers in return. On the other hand, Alice stood beside him and smiled encouragingly. The ceremony was quiet with a kind of solemnity. Peter Kate remembered the funeral poorly, but she knew for sure that it was in the town cemetery. Everyone seems to be in a hurry, as if after him. There was still a whole line of the dead by the coffins, and here everything was slow, unhurried, as if those present were savoring the farewell to the terrible old believer, as if she was the last symbol of some revived era. "Come on, guys," said Alice to her friends when it was over. Autumn had arrived. It was getting noticeably colder outside, and to keep the house warm, they had to heat the stove every day. Frank helped with the firewood. He brought it from a neighboring village, loaded it himself, chopped it himself, and stacked it in a prisoner. "How much do I owe you for this?" Kate asked. He took offense. "I thought we were friends." "We are, friends." Frank said Kate, or something more. She added mentally. "At least I wish we were," she said aloud. "Except you hardly said Kate and I are friends, and you got a whole cartload of firewood for free. So I'm waiting for a price." Frank leaned thoughtfully on the axe, looked at her, and squinted at her sweater. "I need a nice warm one for winter, so I can go to my parents' house in it." Kate smiled, "But you're a sly one." "Wait," he continued nonchalantly. "Another hat and scarf. Warm gloves. More you. Such long warm suits for winter knits. And this one too." Kate laughed. "How do you know so much? Alice showed you. She also made me buy a cell phone and registered it." "Oh, I see. Okay, I'll get you some clothes. Let's go get sizes." They went into the house, and after Kate put the kettle on, she took a centimeter and started taking measurements. Frank stood still, like he was afraid to breathe. "It's okay to breathe," said Kate. "I don't bite. I'm breathing," he replied. "You have such a nice perfume, something floral." Kate suddenly blushed. "Thank you. You always smell of woods and berries. Even now in the fall, I want to cuddle up to you." She suddenly looked up and saw in the gaze of his blue eyes. The kettle was boiling. "Oh," said Kate, turning around and running to the stove. "The parents called," Frank said, as they drank tea and ate night jam earth cakes. Alice's grandmother had passed it on. "That's great. Do you two talk a lot now?" "Yes, almost every day, especially with Mom. She seems to want to know everything about me." "That's not surprising. What do you think of them?" Frank smiled, very caring, warm. "They're so cozy, but you don't feel trapped in a cage or owed anything. And you want to return the favor. I'm very happy for you. I'm very happy for you. Thank you. Anyway, they called to invite us all over for dinner. I mean, you and me and Alice this weekend." "Oh, wow. Alice, I already told you, she's fine with it." "And you?" He looked at her pleadingly. "Yeah, sure, I'd love to. My sister's coming from out of town." "Wow, you'll finally meet her." "I'm very excited. Why?" Kate wondered. Frank shrugged. "I think she'll compare me to my brother. I'm, well, not as educated, smart, interesting, talented." Kate frowned and took his hand. She'd been doing it more often lately and no longer felt the awkwardness out of fear that had been there at first, only mutual warmth and a pleasant tingle. "You are a wonderful, intelligent, kind, interesting, and very talented person." He smiled sadly at Kate. "I am even afraid of the city to this day. I have no education, except for school education. Yes, I haven't even traveled out of the region. And all my talents and skills are only applicable within the village." Kate shrugged her shoulders. "Is that a bad thing? Your human qualities are beautiful always and everywhere. A city is not heaven on earth, and living there doesn't make a person special or better than anyone else. You are very young, and education and any skills you want, you can always learn." He smiled. "You are the best girl in the world. How lucky is my brother that you chose him to be your future husband." Kate shuddered. Removing her hand, she stood up and walked outside. "Is that what I am to him? A good friend and his dead brother's fiancé?" Frank followed her out. "I've done something to offend you." "Hurt?" he asked. Kate forced herself to smile. "No, that you just remembered that Glot hasn't been home for a long time, and the nights are cold now. I decided to call him before it got dark." Just to be sure, Kate called out loudly to Keys, Keys, Keys. Keys, Keys swallowed the sun. "Where are you?" "Meow," came the cat's perplexed voice from inside the house. Frank looked at her strangely. Kate felt herself blushing. She muttered to herself. She hadn't even seen him run home. By the time they went into town for dinner at her parents' house, Fide had already gotten his first snow. Kate had always considered spring and summer her favorite seasons to winter and fall. She only had individual favorite days, like New Year's Eve or Winter Solstice Day, after which the days got longer and longer, and the nights shorter. And of course, the day of the first snow. It covered everything that the merciless fall had done to nature, covered the bare trees, the dry grass, the dark road. It seemed that a holiday had come, in honor of which the earth had put on its best white attire. Only Alice did not share her mood. She drove cautiously, fearing that there might be ice under the snow covering the road. However, they made it quite safely. Their parents came out to greet them on the front porch of the house. "Hello, my good ones," Mom yelled. Didn't they get out of the car in time? Dad was silent, but he smiled and nodded. If he looked at any of them, Kate thought again how unfortunate it was that she hadn't gotten to know them in Peter's lifetime. How nice it must have been to get together with them for family evenings like this. "So you're going to?" the inner voice said snidely, only instead of Peter Frank. Kate shook her head, overtaking the thought, and meanwhile Frank was hugging his parents tightly. "Well," said Dad, "let's go meet a visitor from faraway Europe. Your sister Nancy was only 20, but she was already feeling some kind of adulthood and independence. I guess living abroad away from her family had taken its toll." "Hi." She said hello with a wide smile and hugged her brother, who stood timidly in the middle of the living room, not knowing what to do. "Hi." He hugged her back. Everyone made their way to the table. The excitement Frank felt at seeing his sister, and for him she was worried. And Kate had subsided, and now everyone was just enjoying the family dinner and sharing the news. "Mom has told me a lot about you," Nancy said, turning to her brother. "Of course, I'm only here for 2 weeks, but I really hope I'll have time to get to know you." Frank shrugged his shoulders. 2 weeks, even too long. My entire biography could probably be told in 5 minutes, and my geography doesn't go much farther than this town. Nancy smiled. "It's good of you to say that. I was just about to invite you all to visit me for New Year's vacation." Carefully, Dad clarified. The daughter nodded. "And you and Mom and Frank and Kate with?" "Alice for sure." "Oh," Mom exclaimed. Nancy explained, "I have a very rich friend. She usually goes somewhere warm for the winter, Maldives, Bali, and so on. And she's asked me to look after her lovely French country house." "In these months, wow," said Alice. Nancy looked at her and nodded. "I'm thinking the same thing. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all. In the meantime, I want to make my own trip to my brother's village." Frank suddenly smiled. "Okay." Kate was worried. Everyone else in the car seemed calm, though. Alice was spinning the steering wheel and remembering if she had bought everything she had planned for the store. Frank was asleep and Nancy was happily watching the road. She even asked to sit in the front seat for a better view. She's a city girl. She wondered if Kate would say something bad about the countryside and hurt Frank, or, on the contrary, convince him to move to the city for good. What am I going to do then? She looked at Frank in the dream. He looked so relaxed and happy that Katya felt ashamed of her decimal thoughts. What did it matter where he lived after all? As long as he was happy in that place. She was just a friend and fiancée of a brother he didn't even know. Is it true that you have old believers living here? Nancy asked Alice. She shrugged her shoulders. And now, I guess, almost no one observes anything anymore. But in the old days, yes, it was common. Great. We've got a long way to go. Just about to turn off the highway, then a little bumpy off-roading, and we're there. The off-road and the seeming aftermath of the village seemed and delighted Nancy, and Kate calmed down. Especially they had agreed that the girl would stay with her. After everyone had gone home, it was decided to take a break after the road. It's nice here, said Nancy, looking at the lot pleased with the attention from another guest. Isn't it? Kate asked. Yeah, why are you surprised? I thought you liked it here. But I do. I just thought you were used to a different environment. Nancy, it doesn't mean that everything else is alien to me. It's beautiful here, the nature and the sense of solitude. I can't think of a better place to be alone. Yes, I agree with you there. Except Nancy has a sly smile. I have a theory that we go somewhere to live a certain period of our lives and move on. And I think your sphere and time here is coming to an end. Kate raised her eyebrows at Frank and me. And what do you mean by that, Kate? Well, I'm not a little girl. I can see the way you look at each other. No, it's not like that. He considers me just a friend and his late brother's fiancé. Kate pressed her lips together. She wasn't going to voice it like that. But Nancy continued to smile just as calmly, stroking the cat. Yeah, so he's not just a friend to you. What's the difference? Kate said grimly. It makes a big difference. I'm pretty sure you are to him too. It's a strange thing. She stopped talking. Apparently she liked dramatic pauses. Kate didn't want to give in to this provocation, but she couldn't help asking what kind of thing. Peter became the link that connected you in the beginning. And now he's standing between you. Nancy, I'm sorry, but you're jumping to conclusions, said Kate. She got up and went to the door. Where are you going? I'm going to get some firewood. It's getting cold. Nancy spent the next day exploring the village. She went to Alice's store, and with her brother's help, she went all over the neighborhood. She really enjoyed it all. She would have stayed a couple more days, she told Katya, but there's not much time. I have to stay with my parents and visit my friends. I'm very glad we got to know each other better, Frank said. I too answered him, sister, and I am looking forward to visiting everyone, especially Alice me. Surprised the girl. Yes, you so managed to organize a store in a remote village. I think when you see how we have everything organized, you'll definitely want to expand your business. Only if you open branches in the neighboring village, Alice joked. Oh, well, said Nancy. She was driven into town by Alice, who had to go shopping. Frank and Kate saw her off as the car disappeared around the corner. Frank suddenly shifted from foot to foot and said, we need to talk. Sure, let's go inside, Kate said. Her insides clenched. It must be about him wanting to move to the city. Maybe go to school or get a job. Why am I so worried about this? I should be happy for him as a friend. But she wasn't, even though she tried to smile. What did you want to talk about? Nancy started me off. He said I'm so used to being unloved that I'm completely unable to notice myself or those around me. Kate didn't understand what he was getting at. Why did she say that? That you don't treat me like a friend. It's true. She could hardly bring herself to lift her head and look into his eyes. There was so much fear, excitement, worry, and hope in them that she couldn't torture him for another second. Well, of course not. You're more to me than a friend. Really, she nodded. Frank exhaled relieved. I was so afraid all this time, he said. Afraid that I was just a shadow of my brother to you, that you were only socializing with me in memory of him. Sometimes I thought there was something more between us, and I was ready to confess my feelings to you. But then I thought, no, I'm just a friend, and I'm not ready to lose her friendship. I'd rather not say anything. I smiled, though. I was afraid of the same thing. He looked surprised. Why are you surprised? You said yourself the other day that I'm just a friend and fiancé to you. Oh, what a fool I am. Frank excitedly stood up and walked around the apartment. Kate, the most amazing girl I've ever met in my life. You're beautiful, smart, talented, honest, funny. The whole world is open to you. Can you do whatever you want? And me. He frowned, lowered his eyes, pressed his lips together. Kate was silent. It was obvious that Frank was struggling with himself to say it. And she did not rush him. I'm just an uneducated savage. I'm afraid you'll be bored with me. I know nothing of the world outside the village. I don't want to keep you here beside me, but I don't know what I'll do there. Peter said fondly to Kate, "You are wonderful, intelligent, articulate, talented. We can decide together where we want to be and what we want to do. If we want to, we'll live in the city if we don't like it. Come back here. Or maybe we pick a third place where neither you nor I have ever been and settle there. You don't have to be who you just called yourself for the rest of your life. That's not who you are. You and I can be whoever we want to be. We'll get to know each other, get to know the world. Kate, I'm ready to do anything with you. I'm ready to come out of my shell and into the world too." She smiled. "I suggest we start with a New Year's vacation at your sister's. That's a deal. In the meantime, I'll go get some firewood. It's getting cold. I don't want you and me to freeze out here tonight." Frank went out, leaving the door slightly open. Frosty air flew into the house and swallowed, smelled the drop in temperature, unhappily pushed and jumped into his mistress's arms. "Don't be afraid," Kate said. "We have someone to take care of us today."
Subscribe and click the bell. Camille began to twist her head in front of the mirror, trying to see her hairstyle. The hairdresser almost pulled an extra strand of hair away from her and told her not to do it again. So threateningly she said, "Sit up straight, or you'll end up bald. Miranda, I need to see what's going on. When I'm done, you can look at it then." Miranda was Camille's own sister, so she treated her like that. There were rarely any misunderstandings between them, and all disputes were settled by compromise. However, as big sister, the difference was 3 years. Miranda sometimes had a commanding manner, and she seemed to like it a lot. "And if I don't like it," Camille pleaded. "It's all right, we'll fix it." Miranda replied with humor, "This is the 3rd time you've come to see me this month. Are you not satisfied with your own appearance? I can't decide on an image. Honestly, as soon as I plunged into business, I want everything at once. And there are so many worries that I can barely keep up." "Oh, come on. Don't be so smug. It's only a small cafe, and there's not enough customers to get tired. If you can't keep up, ask your son and daughter-in-law to help you." "You're wrong about the customers. Some days there are no vacancies," Camille corrected her. "As for William and his fiancée, I'd rather invite strangers. My son didn't take my advice. Now he'll have to make his own way." "You shouldn't do that, sister. He won't forgive you." I shook my head. "Miranda, mark my word, you'll have to ask him for help. Only it won't be too late. I can handle it myself." With a frown furrowing her brow, Camille replied, "And get your hair done. I have to get back to the cafe," Miranda continued, her sister. But at the same time, she was slightly offended by her attitude towards her own son. William was considered the most promising assistant in the business. He had a degree in economics, but at the moment he was investing his knowledge in the development of another firm, and he could have worked at his mother's cafe to make it even more profitable. But no, Camille didn't want to see her sister-in-law Lisa as a rival, especially since they had different characters and views on life. Not only that, her sister-in-law initially seemed to her a wiretapped and uneducated girl. She had a wrong opinion that they were not a couple and that they were different. Camille had too high an opinion of herself. Despite the fact that she had nothing to do with powerful people, the cafe didn't give her any preferential treatment, but she told everyone she knew that she ran a serious business. Of course, they tried not to argue with her and just nodded their heads. But behind her back, they would say things that would make your hair stand on end. It is possible that Camille knew about it, but did not pay attention. She believed that all means are good for achieving the goals, and if necessary, it is possible to go over the heads. Well, now it was all set. Miranda finished and showed the result of her work. What's not bad? I would even say stylish. Camille replied with a bow of her lips, satisfied. I tried. So you owe me a bonus. All right, I'll tip you. Well, thank you and you're welcome. What was that about? Your hair on your head. You mean your hair? Miranda waved her hand. Oh, I see. Humor in all its glory. Camille nodded. Then hold on, the Joker deserves it. She opened her purse and took out a $3,000 bill and handed it to Miranda. You took it carefully and tucked it into your apron pocket. Thank you for such a generous tip. Oh, come on. It's not like we're strangers, and I have something to pay with, especially since you got your hair done. I just made myself look like a real businesswoman. And now no one can say you're just a housewife. They're right to a certain extent, Camille shrugged. I spend most of my time at home in cafes and come back every other day, and then only for important issues and business meetings. But that's not the point. The main thing is that you like it. And think about your son. He's just starting his family life. He needs your support. We'll see. I can't promise anything. But by the way, I've done everything on my own, and nobody gave me anything for free. I had to literally grind my teeth to find my own piece of happiness. Did you do the same with the cafe? Miranda asked slyly. I don't know what you mean. Camille shook her head. She pretended that she didn't get the meaning of the question. And about the money you used to open it. And it's not just a gift of fate, but a serious investment. Except if it doesn't work out, you know what's gonna happen. Everything will be fine. I'm sure of it. And there's no need to jump to conclusions. My cafe is just gaining momentum, and soon you'll see a real surge in traffic. People will be coming in from all over the neighborhood. Well then, I wish you success. Miranda hugged her sister and on full automatic fixed her hair. The bee had gotten a little confused. I'm sorry I got a little emotional with you. It's okay, I'm used to it. Camille waved her hand. You've always been big and fit, not like I'm skinny and short. You took after your mom and I took after my dad. And that's something to be proud of. You're right. They gave us a life and helped us make up our minds. Thanks again for the haircut. I'll stop by if I have time. Okay, maybe Saturday. Miranda sighed and shook her head as she looked at her sister. Apparently, she didn't like Camille's attitude toward life's priorities, and above all, her negative reaction to her own son, who had done nothing wrong, except that he had gotten together with a girl without listening to her advice. However, William was 25 years old, and he had every right to control his own destiny. After he started living with Lisa, he never asked her for money, all because he did not want to humiliate himself, knowing his mother's temper. Besides, he didn't want to look like a worthless man in her eyes. But what's interesting is that Lisa didn't reproach him for their humble existence. She herself worked at the market, traded things, and also earned in the general family budget. However, William was not in a hurry, and with the registration of relations, agreeing to a civil marriage. Between them, initially formed trust and mutual understanding, and Lisa calmly treated that as something William said, we will have to live like this for 6 months or a year to save up for the wedding. And then he also made it clear that he would not go to his mother to beg for money. It's not to say he was proud. It's just that there was a precedent when he had to overstep his own principles. This incident happened right after graduation. William urgently needed money, and there were no other options but his mother at that moment. But after her answer, he lost the desire to turn to her for help for the rest of his life. She unashamedly said, "Son, you are an adult now, so solve your own problems and don't come to me for a handout." It sounded rude and hurtful. William didn't expect such a response. It was like he'd been hit with ice water. It turned out that he did not turn to his mother for help, but came to beg. And this is despite the fact that at that time she did not yet have a cafe, and she worked as an ordinary accountant at the factory. However, already at that time, Camille began to think of herself as a high-flying man and did not pay attention to what they thought relatives and acquaintances. She had no remorse for her mistakes and missteps. On the contrary, she put them in the rank of gaining invaluable experience and braved the fact that everything has its time, and soon everything will change for the better. But it took time and years for the business to become a lifelong endeavor. It is likely that Camille was aware of this, but did not accept it as a settled reality and moved forward according to some specific plan of her own. At the same time, the problems that came her way made her more and more nervous and made her look back. And Camille began to notice that it was not so easy to manage the business. However, she could not admit it to her closest circle and above all to her own sister, because Miranda was on good terms with William. On the one hand, it was a vicious circle, which she created herself. On the other hand, there was an opportunity to get out of the trap. The second option promised prospects for development and growth. But for that, she had to agree to Miranda's proposal. Her sister had hinted that William could use her help. What she didn't say was how best to do it. Given the way things were between Camille and her son, it was hard to imagine them reconciling. Besides, he didn't live alone, and that meant that she would have to take her daughter-in-law on bail and share the family life with her, despite their differences and divergences. Camille could not yet decide on this step, because in this case would have to come down from heaven and do what her son did when he asked her for money to overstep his own principles. After weighing the pros and cons, she came to the conclusion that she could do without his help. She even said out loud, "It doesn't hurt to need someone else's handouts." And this meant that she categorically denied any interference in her business, did not want to share it with anyone, much less show the real state of affairs. And if her son found out, he would have a reason to ridicule her, and in her opinion, the rest of the chain would get the information. In general, Camille was so intimidated by herself that she didn't even want to hear about any help. She was constantly seeing the snide faces of her relatives, and she was not going to let them pounce on her like a pack of hungry hyenas. She was pulling her weight with all her might, refusing to accept the harsh reality. When Camille arrived home, the first thing she did was to take a shower and wash off the rest of the day, except for the hair salon. She also visited the cafe and solved some organizational issues. The manager showed the reports for the week, and in general, they were more or less optimistic. Not to say that the place was making a fabulous profit, but so far it seemed to be able to stay afloat. I prepared a light dinner. Camille turned on, relaxing her music, and sat down massage chair. It was set to the right program. And after a few minutes, she felt an inexpressible sensation. Euphoria. Such an impression as if she was in the tender hands of a real masseur. And he carefully, with extreme precision, relieved the tension all over her body. This attitude to relaxation suggests that Camille loved herself more than anyone else. At the same time, selfishness partly offset by a cordiality to those who were on good terms with her. Well, or didn't try to put sticks in her wheels, and generally showed proper respect, even if one wanted to make remarks. Criticism hurt her ego, and Camille could lose her temper, regardless of personalities. True, quickly calmed down, realizing that this is not the way out. To some extent, she retained her common sense, and she did not allow herself too sharp steps. Restraint in her emotions sometimes saved her from the most disastrous consequences. What happened the next day, however, unleashed a wave of indescribable anger. Waking up at 10 o'clock, Camille planned to go out of town to her best friend. Miranda long invited her, but they still could not meet. Now she had the opportunity to visit and talk about buying a plot of land. In her mind, she wanted to build a cottage and grow flowers there, so that she could invite her friends and acquaintances and brag about the blooming garden. But the trip had to be canceled because of an urgent call from the manager. Stephen was gasping for air as he spoke into the phone. Camille, this is just nonsense. We didn't realize it ourselves. He came in and gave us a hard time. And he said we were gonna be in big trouble. Yeah, like they explained what happened in the exam. She gave the manager a hard time. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm worried and anxious. The thing is, we got a visit from the SS, and they found some irregularities. If we don't fix them by tomorrow, they'll close the cafe. What did you find? Stephen, open alcohol in the kitchen, ventilation problems, poor service in the lounge, and a few not washing their plates. The manager replied with a tremor in his voice, but Emily and the waiters have nothing to do with it. They do their job properly. I have no complaints about them. Camille muttered angrily, but Rick will have to be dealt with severely. I've seen him leave bottles open by the stove. I wouldn't be surprised if he's drinking them too. So what do we do now? We've got to get this fixed by tomorrow, or we'll have to close the cafe. And I'll figure something out. In the meantime, you clean up where I'm not needed, and don't let anyone slack off, or I won't see you, my staff, and I'll hire another team. All I have to do is snap my fingers. Yeah, I got it. You got it. The manager's voice was shaking, and it spoke of how he had become in the face of her threats. At the same time, the confusion from the first minutes of the conversation suggested to Camille that he was barely coping with the duties assigned to him, and he was bound to fail at some point. But what to do? She didn't know yet. However, certain thoughts were in her head, and the main one was to invite her son to help her. But before doing so, Camille intended to solve the problems herself and not to waste time. She called the inspectorate. The director of the organization answered and hinted at money. All that remained was to collect the necessary amount of money, hand it over to the right person, and that was the end of it. However, this option did not suit her, and all because she was afraid of the continuation of extortion. In other words, she would have to give a hand now, and then she would have to pay back all the time. But time was running out, and no one was going to forgive them for their violations. Not only that, but more serious problems could arise. Camille had already imagined what it would be, but there was nowhere to go, and she began to look in her notebook for her son's phone number. There hadn't been any calls lately, so it wasn't saved in the outgoing calls. But tears came to her eyes when she saw the signature, Sanulia. No matter what you say, but her heart felt her own daughter. And no matter what was going on between them at the moment, there was still a response, holding a pause, as if it was the riskiest move for her. Camille dialed William's number. 3 beeps sounded before he answered. Hello, I'm listening. Hello, son. How are you doing? Hi, Mom. I'm fine. And if you mean I'm not starving and going around the world with my hand out, you don't have to worry, do you? We have everything we need to live. I wasn't going to talk about that, Camille replied, and with barely restrained emotion, I just wanted to know how you were doing. I don't need much, just a piece of your voice. You heard my answer. William said unhappily, something else. Or can we stop talking? Wait, I have something to tell you. Just don't interrupt and take it seriously. I don't want you to feel like your mother was a helpless person. Are you in some kind of trouble? That's where you should have started. And don't think about how I'm gonna react, despite our differences. You're my mother, and nothing's changed lately. That's good to hear, son, Camille replied, almost crying. I thought you'd forgotten we were related. No, Mom. But unlike you, I didn't put up barriers. And if you've called to ask for something, you can count on me. The thing is, William, my cafe needs a competent manager, and I'd like you to take the job. But if memory serves, you have a Stephen there. And he seems to be doing okay. Exactly. It's like a problem shows up when you weren't expecting it. She interrupted her son. Sometimes I think the staff create them on purpose. I don't think so. Although I don't rule out that some of them are negligent in their duties. That's not surprising. It's not like you're there that often. Well, they're feeling the pinch. I knew you'd say that. I never doubted your insight. So, what are you gonna do? take over? I don't know. It's kind of sudden. Especially since I have a job. Stephen hesitated. I need to think about it. Besides, you know I'm not the only one who makes decisions. Yeah, well, Lisa has a say in your family too. And you can't quit your job. Camille replied with a heavy sigh. But on the other hand, one head is better than two. You can combine them for now. And at the same time to think up such a plan of action that all enemies and competitors would be jealous. We don't need enemies, of course, but we can compete with our rivals. Besides, healthy excitement only inspires great achievements and gives confidence that you are on the right path. And I can take that as a yes. I think it is. But I'm not quitting just yet. So I'm sorry, son. The problems need to be solved today. And first and foremost, discipline. You said yourself that they're sensing weakness. You should have noticed it yourself. You own the cafe. Let's not talk about that now, Camille said irritably. This is about your professional qualities, and it's important to me that you clean up the cafe. All right, it's a deal. I'll be there in an hour. Having finished talking to him, she put the phone away on the nightstand and made a thoughtful face in her head. Immediately, there was a fleeting thought, and was it right that I called my son to help? He would think that I had failed. My inner gut began to tell me that I should act, relying on my own strength. But the mother's heart was drawn to the native blood of the kidney, and having made certain conclusions, Camille still chose the second option. With William, it would be possible to turn mountains. If she had done it earlier, then she would not have faced the problems that fell like from the horn of plenty. At the same time, Camille gained invaluable experience, and at certain moments it helped her a lot. She had even gotten away with it when there seemed to be no chance of escape. But now there were insurmountable difficulties, primarily because he had lost control over his subordinates, and they were increasingly working overtime. But she had no good reason to fire any of them. Or rather, she didn't have the courage to say goodbye. Camille decided to entrust this mission to her son to ward off the storm clouds. Again, it was not without mercantile interests. Although, if one judged it that way, she depended on him too. At the moment, the son was the only free salvation, and it's a good thing he agreed. He could have remembered all her antics. Camille, as imagined their meeting after a painful parting, and then a little bit even shivers ran down his spine, as if cold from somewhere it was pulled. Dialing the CES director's number again, she proudly told him, "We will fix everything. You'll see it tomorrow." Good. Cell phone rings. Glad to hear it. But if anything, the cafe will have to close. The man replied sneeringly, "Don't even think about it. I won't give you that opportunity." Camille felt relieved that she had partially solved her problems. All she had to do was wait for her son, who promised to correct her mistakes. He did not reproach her for taking on an impossible burden, but at the same time he made his position clear and made it clear that it was better to work together. She did not even argue with this, because she had experienced all the vicissitudes and intricacies of business. And if at first everything seemed to be a simple hobby, it soon turned into a heavy routine, and it required more and more dedication from her. And Camille couldn't get the last juices out of herself. And as a result, both the management system and the quality of service suffered. The SES representative quickly discovered this and demanded that it be fixed, but left a window of opportunity for a financial settlement, and it was up to her to take advantage of it. For now, Camille opted for her son's help in the hope that he would spare her the unnecessary expense. An hour later, as promised, William arrived, but not alone. Lisa arrived with him. She looked around fearfully, as if she were afraid of meeting monsters. In fact, she had a state of surprise. After all, it had been so long since Camille had invited them over to her place, playing the part of the cheap and grand business lady. And now this event, of course, it couldn't help but come as a shock. "Well, here we are." "Mom, right from the doorstep," said William, and put his arm around her shoulders. "As you can see, I'm not offended by you, and we can discuss everything in peace. Thank you, son. I didn't expect to hear any other words from you. She nodded back at him. Hello, Camille. Lisa greeted her quietly. Hello, sister-in-law. Why are you so weak? I didn't eat enough porridge this morning. No, I just had some. Oh, you probably weren't planning on coming to see me. But to be honest, I wasn't, because you haven't called us in a while. Mom, you called me looking for a reason to fight. William frowned. No, son, not even a thought. I shook my head. I was just checking just in case you really did have other plans, and you had to change them because of me. That's okay. We'll do it some other time, especially since your problems are more important. And I wanted to get straight to the point so I could get them done by tomorrow. Maybe I'll have tea and cake then, Camille suggested. I'd like that. I like desserts. What about you? Lisa? I'd love to. I like cake. Well, that's fine. Come on then, sister-in-law. Help me set the table. What am I supposed to do? William looked at them in surprise. Oh, I almost forgot. Here's Stephen's number. Call him and clear up the situation. Anyway, plug in. Time's running out. I do not want to blush tomorrow in front of the SES. Besides, I told them, or rather, the director, that we'll fix it. I'll see what I can do. His mother and Lisa went to the kitchen, and he started calling Stephen. He answered only after the second ring and didn't immediately realize who was bothering him. Sorry, I didn't recognize William. How long will you live? Thank you. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how to fix all the problems. After all, they didn't arise on a single day, and it's obvious that the staff has been unraveling the situation for a long time. And you didn't follow up on it properly. But you know I'm gonna talk about this right now, so get pen and paper ready. Meanwhile, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were busy preparing for the tea party. Besides the cake, which was cut into small pieces, they decided to make sandwiches on the table, and immediately smoked sausage appeared, followed by cheese, tomatoes, cucumbers, and salad leaves. And it was all topped off with a prefabricated arrangement of waffles and candy in the crystal vase. What William was talking to Stephen about, they weren't even listening. They didn't seem at all interested in how events were unfolding there, and one could assume that all their attention was focused on their own communication. In other words, Camille and Bulega were trying to establish contact, and they succeeded quite well because they did everything smoothly and without disagreements. In any case, no one teased or rushed them. Camille even complimented Lisa on the quality of the slicing. She liked the way her sister-in-law put the cheese and sausage on the plates, and also noted the interesting combination of sandwich layers. Overall, the meeting was a success after a long standoff. Although, to be honest, Camille was worried that they would not find common ground and fight in the first minute. But that didn't happen, and the storm clouds had bypassed them. Looking at the treat, she smiled contentedly and said, I definitely like our tandem. What do you think? I think so too. I agree, Lisa nodded. All the more so because you were kind to me and didn't throw me out on my doorstep. Well, how could I do that? Camille shrugged. Invite you in and then walk out the door. No, I've never stooped so low as to go to all that trouble. What happened with the cafe? It's just little things, but they need to be dealt with. I hope William can do that so I don't have to close the place down. Even so. But why? It was obvious that Lisa did not ask questions out of idle curiosity. She was really worried about the fate of the cafe, even though she had nothing to do with it. The trouble is that I've gotten too caught up in my image. Camille replied sadly with a heavy sigh. I visited beauty salons, fashion boutiques, but I forgot about the main thing. Cafe requires attention, like any other business. And if you let everything go, then you can say goodbye to wives and money. You're right, you need control everywhere. It's hard to imagine stability without it. I trade things at the market, and it seems to be nothing complicated. But if I get distracted, I lose part of the profit or goods. I heard William's voice, And that's where the conversation had to stop. Anyway, he and I solved the main problems, but I still have to go there now. I want to make sure that my words have reached their intended recipients, and if you'll let me, I'll assign individual tasks to the staff. Well done. You can see that there is a commercial spirit, she praised her son. And who do you plan to punish? Well, to think with their heads and work on their conscience. I don't know yet. I'll come and with Stephen we'll decide what to do, shrugged William. By the way, what should I tell them about his current position? You're the manager now. And if you think he'll be useful, keep him as an assistant. I will. That's exactly what I was gonna ask you. The kid's not bad. From the way we talked to him just now, he answered clearly. He was nervous though, but it's no big deal. And as for those who caused the trouble, I'll find a way to talk some sense into them without negative consequences. Everything is in your hands. Go ahead, Camille nodded. You have broad authority. Think of it as acting on my behalf. It's a deal. Then I'll go right away. What about the cake and sandwiches? Lisa asked in surprise. I'll come back and eat. If you leave some for me, William smiled and kissed her on the cheek. And Mother, yes, I almost forgot. You can go now. Lisa and I will take care of her. Looking at his watch, William furrowed his brow. What were you thinking about for a minute? Then waved his hand at them and left the apartment. At that moment, he had only one thought to solve his mother's problems and get home as soon as possible. Though she didn't persecute, he still felt out of place, burdensome and onerous. It seemed to him an invitation, all the more so at the most unexpected moment. William couldn't believe his mother was doing all this unselfishly, well or heartily wishing to make up with him. He knew her character perfectly well, and more than once was convinced that it could not be corrected. His mother would rather make strangers relatives than condescend to him. And this was no exaggeration, for she had never been able to admit her own mistakes. As soon as she had a problem, she immediately turned to her son for help, but not even a word about the fact that she acted very meanly towards him and his fiancée. It was not in her speeches, only restrained emotion and pleas for help. You see, business was starting to fall apart, and something had to be done. William agreed to help without any preconditions. He only hinted that he would solve her problems in his own way. Otherwise, as far as personal relationships were concerned, he remained modestly silent. And that only earned him points with his mother. In fact, he did not say sorry, but you spit in my soul, and I will not save you. No such words came out of his mouth. On the contrary, William felt her distress and came without delay to take the situation into his own hands. But he brought Lisa as a symbol of the family relationship. It was necessary to let the mother realize that they are with her as a whole, love each other, and are not going to part. In addition, the wedding was in the plans as a finishing touch, as well as the beginning of a new path in their lives. And naturally, it would not do without children. In any case, their birth William did not reject, only suggested Lisa, first to get a little stronger and on her feet. It was necessary to prepare carefully for the replenishment, so as not to meet him with empty pockets. After he left for the cafe, Camille, in her right as hostess, placed the tea into mugs and set out a stick of cream. It smells so good. It's like it just came from the plantation. I always buy only the highest grade, and in a familiar tea shop, she boasted to her daughter-in-law, "We don't drink the expensive kind, but it's good too." Lisa shrugged. "That's okay. You've got it all ahead of you, and I didn't come to it right away either. On the other hand, it's all about brains. If they work properly, you can achieve a lot. Not everybody can do what you do, even with a bright head. I think it's important to have support in the beginning. And if you don't have that, it's hard to make your way in life on your own." Nonsense. And I did. And you and William will do great. But you're gonna have to work on yourself. What do you mean? Lisa's eyebrows furrowed, sensing a catch. Yeah, relax. I just wanted to tell you not to stand in one place, she clarified. Her argument, You need to develop, to gain knowledge, a new profession, finally. Well, I'm not sitting at home working. That's understandable. But the market is not the end of the world. You're not going to spend your life selling things. I guess not. But I haven't thought about it yet. Lisa shrugged. You should. Otherwise, you'll regret the opportunities you missed. Taking a sip from her mug, she added, and the best thing is to change your line of work. I don't have a college degree, so a job in a prestigious company is out of the question. Why are you so down in the dumps? You can start small, like waitressing. Are you by any chance referring to your cafe? Lisa asked with a smile. To be honest, yes, especially since William has already agreed. Now he's just getting up to speed and becoming a full-fledged manager. I want to expand, and with the state of affairs as they are at the moment, it's hard to dream of anything. Maybe I can do it, but it takes practice. I've never worked in the service industry. There's a first time for everything, even when we're first born. Don't think that I'm offering you a waitress job on purpose, and you'll think that your mother-in-law is sending you to the bottom. You didn't start out on the top either, Lisa reminded her. So why should I take offense to that? Every job is honored. It doesn't matter what you're doing at the moment. If you're honest and conscientious, there's no talking. Just respect and gratitude for that you don't have to worry about. I don't hurt anyone with money, Camille smiled. All my employees are paid on time, and none of them has ever complained. I'll have to have a word with William. I think he'll be pleased to know that his wife has decided to work with him. So you're saying he's definitely going to be the manager? I'm pretty sure of it. Camille declared proudly. There's not much money to be made at the firm where he works now, and I have the opportunity to move up. Where else? Lisa was surprised. For example, as a cafe director or even owner. Time will tell. It all depends on him. Will you be without your business? No, everything will stay with me. I'll just open a new outlet and manage it there. Because I've agreed to do it as a combination for now. Stephen will stay on as an assistant. See if we can get the cafe out of the doldrums. You have such grandiose plans. It's heartwarming. Lisa smiled, and her eyes sparkled. So I didn't invite you here for nothing. The result is obvious. Camille nodded, and they even clapped their hands. William won't be able to quit right away because he has to test his own strength. But you can start waitressing tomorrow. Thank you, Camille. That's so kind of you. I'm speechless. How can I express my gratitude? Do a good job, and that will be enough. Oh, and love my son without cheating or lying. I wasn't going to do that. With a kind of resentment in her voice, Lisa replied and pouted her lips. Well, don't be offended. I didn't say it out of spite. Camille ran her hand over her head like a mother. But it's important to me, too, that William be in good hands, and not to know grief, as families do when trust fails. And in its place comes meanness and betrayal. Yes, I hear you. You can rest assured of my honesty. I always work, and have always worked with complete dedication. There you go. I haven't even hired her as a waitress at my cafe yet, and I've already humiliated her, and did not even blink an eye, but pretended as if nothing had happened. It is possible that her employees did the same to her, because she did not put them in anything, but decided not to talk about it yet. It was only in a private conversation with Stephen that her son found out, and frankly, he was shocked. True, he did not abandon the case halfway through and brought it to its logical conclusion. In fact, he saved the cafe from closure, and the mother helped to save her reputation. After all, about her could go bad word of mouth, and then the customers would have stopped coming. That seemed to be Camille's greatest fear, not that she had offended her sister-in-law again. It didn't make her feel unbalanced or even compelled to apologize, as she should have done, especially since she knew how the relationship between Lisa and her son had developed. William almost carried his wife in his arms, blew dust from her, and made her happy with his successes at work. Together, they were willing to go to great lengths to achieve their happiness. Let's eat another piece and leave these for William, Camille suggested, looking enigmatically at the cake. "I second that," nodded Liza. And while they were enjoying the dessert, William was giving a lecture to the staff, but not threatening them with dismissal, but asking them to get smart. "Yeah, you gotta realize you can't relax. You're gonna be looking for a new job later, so we should just put in our applications right now." They all asked him. "No, you don't have to do that yet." He shook his head. "But if you don't get smart, my mother will throw you out on the street and not care that some people have families and financial problems." "We understand, William, and we'll try to live up to that trust." "Good. Especially since Stephen is staying with you." "Yes, he'll be my assistant, but other than that, he'll have the same responsibilities. And believe me, I'm not going to humiliate any of you. We will resolve all issues through compromise," Stephen added. "And no problem will go unaddressed." "Yes, that's right. And now we need to close the cafe for preventive maintenance and put it in order. Tomorrow, representatives of the Sanitary and Epidemiological Service will come to inspect the place. We must make sure that they did not find a single comment or violation. We'll do our best. Maybe you can rely on us." Again, the staff replied in unison and began to put things in order. "You see." And no one had to be punished. William looked at Stephen and patted him on the shoulder. "How will you explain Camille to your mother?" "I'll say that I solved everything peacefully and without firing anyone. I'm not in favor of radical methods, although I will not hide that when I was going, I wanted to make a mess. But then I came, assessed the situation, listened, and came to the conclusion that my mother is not a gift either. On the one hand, yes, but Stephen hesitated, trying to find the right words. But she's the owner of the cafe, and that says it all." William interrupted him, and at the same time logically completed the phrase. "That's what I meant. And you will be combining, as I understand it." "Yes, that's right. And then we'll see. I'm in no hurry. No one's pushing me around at my day job, and the management respects me, so I don't see the point in changing anything yet. Isn't that like the horse in the crosshairs thing?" Stephen said and smiled embarrassedly, something like that. "Now go command the team and deal with the ventilation today. The repair crew will be here soon. I've already put in a requisition. I'll be expecting them any minute. And don't forget about the alcohol. Don't let that guy touch it again. What if you do? The first time lying down, he won't understand. They'll kick you out. We don't want any trouble. What if he gets drunk in the middle of the day and shows up like that in front of the guests? There will be a scandal." And with a blow to the reputation of the cafe, nodded Stephen, and even a little sweat, imagining such a picture. "I'll be sure to keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't do anything wrong." "That's good. Keep up the good work. I've got to go. Goodbye, William. And thanks for your kindness. Come on, we'll make it up to you. Today I helped you. Tomorrow you'll do me a favor." William was kind to Stephen, and Stephen was pleased. He didn't have to pack up and leave the cafe. In addition, nothing out of the ordinary happened, although the son of the landlady wanted to publicly punish someone. But it didn't happen, because Lisa kept him from taking rash steps. She understood more than anyone else what respect and honesty were. And if she heard negative things about herself, it didn't mean that she had to mirror them. Lisa did not allow herself to use profanity because she considered it a sign of ignorance and tried to keep her emotions in check, even if she wanted to take them out on someone. She would endure the inner pain and simply walk away in silence. William knew this and was careful to say every word. That was the basis of their family relationship. Coming home from the cafe back to his mother's house, he had no idea what she would tell him. Even more surprising was that Lisa had been supportive, even though it had never been idyllic between them before. And with his new worries, it was a serious test for his nervous system. At the same time, he did not risk dissuading his wife from her decision. "I'm shocked, to be honest. I didn't expect it," William said. After Lisa announced the offer of a waitressing job. "Why not? Better than standing in the market," Camille shrugged. "Besides, they pay tips, and not bad ones at that. Sometimes, and not a day's wages exceeds. All right, let them try. If they don't like it, they'll leave. I talked to the team and realized that they cannot work normally. Wow, I thought it was the other way around. No, Mom, it's fine. It's just that they got a little slack and decided to do me a favor and leave me without a cafe. She snidely continued the line for him. No, you're just imagining things. William reassured her. You'll see that after a while everything will change and the cafe will be transformed for the better. Its name will rumble all over the neighborhood and attract crowds of customers. I'd like to believe that, especially since I don't plan to close. I need a new location to keep growing. Yes, William. Lisa nodded. Your mom wants you to take over the cafe in the future and run the new place herself. It's like the plan of the century. I can't add or subtract. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll see what happens. But for the near future representatives of the SES or any other inspection organizations, will definitely not bother your cafe. Consider it already yours. I decided so. Camille moved to him a plate with a piece of cake. A treat. Lisa and I have had enough. And there are sandwiches left if you want some. You can eat at my place. You won't have to cook anything. Thank you. I really did work up an appetite. William enjoyed the cake, but he looked at his wife and mother. Her bad character and the situation didn't add up. It was too sugary. Everything looked as if a thick layer of honey had been smeared on, but there was still tar underneath. And if it was not removed and checked at once, then at the very end one could come across bitterness and humiliation. Thinking about it, William decided not to jump to conclusions. It was one thing for his wife to want to work in the cafe, but it was another thing for her mother to treat her the same way. After all, judging by what he had heard from the staff, he could expect anything from her. And that was worrying, because she hadn't worried about her daughter-in-law's future before. And this is so generous. It's like a free cheese in a mousetrap, but no trap. I had to wonder where the catch was, where to look for it, so as not to be in a stupid position. William didn't know the answers to these questions yet, but he took note of them to keep the situation under control. He didn't want to be left in the lurch and lose his wife. Lisa was an impressionable person, and sometimes she took events to heart. William, of course, tried to explain that it was not necessary to let everything pass through him, but he realized that everyone's state of mind was different, and it was impossible to predict in advance this or that reaction. So it turned out that one hand pushed his wife into the maelstrom, and the other sought to protect her from trouble. And it seemed that there had been no significant shocks lately, except for minor incidents in public places. Lisa, every now and then, got into curious situations. Not that she provoked them on purpose. They just sort of found her. I remember how she once helped an old man and picked up a purse from the floor of the bus, which he dropped. So instead of thanking Lisa, the old man scolded her for embezzling his change, even though the wallet was empty. Only documents were there. It was hard, but the old man was calmed down. Just before he left, he suddenly remembered that he had taken money for exactly 2 trips. At that moment, Lisa almost sobbed, but she pulled herself together in time. And all because the old man apologized. The incident was over, but it still left a residue. Since then, she's been cautious of any good intentions. Surprisingly, she was sympathetic to her mother-in-law's proposal. She didn't analyze and compare facts. In general, she took her word as a native person, despite the fact that she and William had been at odds until recently. On the other hand, she could not hold a grudge for long. She had a tremulous and tender heart, and the residue of any unpleasantness had dissolved. And Lisa was like a dandelion again. Anger and hatred didn't take root in her soul. They a priori did not find a source of realization to strike an unexpected blow. William, having recovered from the cake, ate his sandwiches, and as he drank his tea, his mother suddenly asked him, "Listen, son, why don't you and Lisa move in with me? Interesting movie, but we'd rather stay at home for now." "We'll live," he answered, and inwardly tensed at such a proposal. "Well, look, if you think so, I'd be glad to see you. We need time. Such questions are not solved in a hurry." Lisa supported her husband. "Sooner or later you'll formalize your relationship," Camille continued, "and I'd like to see you two together all the time. That way there will be harmony in the family, and it will be easier to help each other. We'll think about it, especially since we're used to the way of life we have between us," William replied, and thus drew a line under their conversation about a possible move. And I realized I wouldn't insist. Decisions like this take maturity. And as my sister-in-law rightly said, it's best not to get emotional. Yeah. They're not the best counselors in this case. I agree, Lisa nodded. "Well, shall we pack up then? Thank you for your hospitality. Everything was delicious." "Aha, apart from the cake and sandwiches, I didn't offer you anything. The whole day just kind of flew by." "That's okay. We didn't come here to eat. We're here to solve your problems and make a difference." "That's true. But still, I apologize for the meager table," she said guiltily, lowering her head. "I liked it, just like home." Lisa put her arm around her shoulders and at the same second removed her hands. It felt like a hot surface. "Thanks for the compliment. And don't forget what I told you. Anything can happen in life. And this is stability. All right. Thank you for your wise counsel." William and Lisa left the apartment, and Camille crouched down and cupped her head with her hands. What she was thinking at that moment, one could only guess, but the nervousness around the problems was very alarming, and primarily because they were the main indicators of impending collapse. Camille did not tell her son that the chair was wobbling beneath her, and it was still unknown how her future fate could have turned out. She did not dare to reveal the main cards in the hope that by that time her son would decide everything for her. But he didn't have all the information and power. And in the end, he almost found himself between a hammer and an anvil, and only the wife again found a way out of the situation. Lisa gave the last thing she had to save the family. But by then it was clear William's mother was in grave danger, and ironically, she had created it for herself, even bravado, trying to minimize the loss. But that didn't help either. And after a while, the shocking truth came to the surface. The only person who had the vaguest inkling of it was Camille's own sister. Miranda watched her business endeavors from the sidelines, but stayed out of the way with unnecessary advice. She had enough of her own worries to take on other problems as well. At the same time, Miranda was genuinely worried about her sister and hoped that she hadn't fallen into a trap. After all, business, in addition to the investment of money and time, could take away the most important life. And such cases happened when businessmen lost. At first, they also started easily and effortlessly, and then everything flew into the abyss. And it was good if they managed to save themselves at the very last moment. Such people were called lucky. But there were also those to whom fate did not smile, and then only a marble or granite slab somewhere at the edge of the road reminded of them. Of course, Camille did not want such a fate for herself, but she could not help but realize what she had gotten herself into. All the more reason to use other people's money for her own well-being, and her sister had warned her about that. When it first started, that's what she used to say. "Look, Camille, it'll all go down the drain. You'll be looking for the fifth corner." "Nothing will happen to me," Camille said. "And I was born under a lucky star. In case of emergency, my son will help me and won't go anywhere. But I don't want to have to do it myself." This conversation took place just as Camille was having her final quarrel with William. He wouldn't take her advice, and he wouldn't leave Lisa. And to keep her out of the way and keep her mind off him, he moved with his wife across town. Camille had not visited them all this time, and they had no desire to ask for a visit. And today's meeting, frankly, had been confusing. William didn't expect his mother to ask for help, but I couldn't say no, because then I'd hate myself. Inside, he still held out hope that his mother would change her attitude toward him and Lisa. But time flew by, and there were no signals from her. In fact, neither of them wanted to make the first step. And in this situation, pride was an obstacle. If one had been offended once, it wasn't certain that it wouldn't happen again. That's what was holding them back. Like a red rag for a bull during a bullfight, and at the same time it was impossible to concentrate on more important details. It was as if they had spoken in an unknown direction. Leaving behind a hazy trail, William tried to put all the puzzles of the Rebuses together, but eventually abandoned the endeavor. He lacked the stamina to find the missing link in the long chain of events. In addition, there was partially no logic with which to explain anything. When they arrived home, William and Lisa breathed a sigh of relief. It felt as if they had been interrogated. They barely got out of there, forgetting everything. They threw off their shoes and sat down on the sofa together and said in one voice, "What a day it's been today." I could hardly refrain from saying it to my mother's face. William shook his head. Lisa's eyebrows furrowed at the cafe. "No. About the natural relationship, I thought it was strange that she would take such a step. She said she'd never turn to us in her life, and she said a lot of other things. But we're not vindictive people, and we found the strength to forgive your mother. She's not a gift, but she's not a stranger to us. I haven't seen her eager to be related to us lately." William's hesitating. If you think that a couple of words spoken on the fly is a sign of kinship, you are mistaken. But what is it really? Did your mom try so hard? Are you looking for a black cat in a dark room again? Yeah, because I don't believe she's sincere. I helped her with her problems at the cafeteria. I'll let her work it out from here. So you didn't do everything angrily? Lisa asked and shook her head. I just started. And if you want to understand, you have to go into it thoroughly, and then everything will fall into place. So what's the matter? Your mother offered you the manager's job. I'll have to think about it. I'm sensing a catch. I just can't figure out what it is. There doesn't seem to be anything to worry about, except for the SES nagging, but I still feel uneasy. I was also kind of wary of her offer to work as a waitress in a cafe. But then I thought and came to the conclusion that if we make a concerted effort, then who knows? Suddenly, the establishment will really be ours to roll up our lips. Mother would never go for that, even though she promised a gold mine. William put her down. I think we should be very careful with her. But you heard her offer to sign the cafe over to you. Lisa stood her ground. That's right. And that's what worries me the most. Why hasn't she had that idea before? You don't think my mother wants to get rid of all her problems in one fell swoop? I don't think so. I mean, aside from those SES complaints you've practically dealt with, there's nothing there. Where would they come from? Besides, she would have told you about them. Yeah, Lisa, we've been living with you for almost a year, and I still haven't realized that my mom knows how to manipulate people. I didn't even realize it. I shrugged. That's what was going on today. And you left. William poked fun at her and accepted a waitressing position. So you didn't refuse to help her either. I told her not to go. What did you say? Yeah, you're right about that. We both let her talk us into it. And the interesting thing is, nobody forced us to go. If you're lucky enough to be born with the gift of persuasion, you use it all your life. Let's give it a shot. You'll combine your day job with running the cafe. I'll start working as a waitress. I can quit the market tomorrow. The owner won't be upset. Maybe she's right, and we're just screwing ourselves. William replied thoughtfully. It's just that, you know, she hasn't contacted us for a long time. And now she's offered us such goodies. And most importantly, she didn't ask for anything in return. It was as if she decided to give up everything. Not to be dramatic, not to inflame the situation. Lisa put her arm around his shoulders and kissed him gently. Time will tell and put everything in its place. And if you, that is, if we are right, it will be a life lesson for us. Yeah, I guess that's what we'll do. Don't go looking for a black cat where there's never been one. We gave ourselves a headache for nothing, and now we don't know how to get rid of it. I've got a good remedy, and you know what I mean. Lisa pulled him into the bedroom, and William's eyes lit up with anticipation of a passionate night. Such a remedy. Not only did the headache go away, but any other soreness stopped reminding of itself. Not only that, there was a burning desire to do good deeds. The body received such a powerful charge of vigor that it was enough for several days. And finally, the state of health improved, and in women also the emotional background. At the same time, the doubts that arose did not just cause them to have a heated discussion. Most likely, intuition worked, and there was dissonance in making further decisions. After all, William's mother once again. After all, William's mother really did not spoil with such gifts. She was only trying to make herself feel good. Naturally, under such circumstances, it is time to think about mercantile interests, and not only to earn trust, but also to benefit in this regard. Camille is quite good at it. At the dawn of creating a business and opening a cafe, she did not think about the difficulties she would have to face, and the first alarm bell in the form of a half-empty hall at rush hour forced her to take extreme measures. She started spending money unnecessarily, and that led to some accounting irregularities. With difficulty, but some things were resolved. But the biggest problem remained, and after a while, it got to her head. Yes, so that I left confused, however, got rid of all their barking, and with tears in my eyes thanked for the rescue. She was literally pulled out of the trap at the last moment. Just a little bit more, and there would have been a new granite slab by the road. And so she got off with a slight scare and finished her business epic. Didn't take what turned out to be a heavy load. It was not for nothing that her sister told her she'd be better off doing something quiet. The next day, William went to his main job, and Lisa called the owner of the trading tent and agreed with him on a 2-week vacation at her own expense. Whatever she said, her intuition told her the right thing to do, so she didn't hurry to quit her job. At the same time, and warned her husband that he did not particularly rush into the documents, did not take responsibility if her mother offered to sign any papers. The premonition of trouble did not leave Lisa until the very last moment, up to the day when the unpleasant event happened, and immediately after it the flywheel of global changes spun, which almost pulled everyone who in one way or another had something to do with the cafe. Having arrived at the new place of work, Lisa first of all assessed the situation and realized that there were enough problems in the year that they had not been here. There had been dramatic changes. Some things had gotten better, others had fallen into disrepair. But the saddest thing was that people were passing by more and more often, not even looking inside, not even with one eye. All said that the mother-in-law lost her way and, without realizing it, pulled the business to the bottom. No wonder she needed her son's help. I didn't feel right wearing that hat. I thought I had the strength to cope with any problems, but it turned out to require courage and fortitude. And so she stalled out. Opening the glass door, Lisa entered the cafe, and when she saw her mother-in-law behind the bar, she said hello loudly. "Good afternoon, Camille." "Hello, sister-in-law. You haven't decided to take me up on my offer." "Yeah. What have I got to lose? It's not my last day." "I live in," she shrugged her shoulders and announced the hall with a look. "What about the market? You won't regret it with a squint." My mother-in-law asked. "No, it's all right. It's not a big loss. Besides, you promised career advancement. And that's the most important thing at my age. I like the way you think. And if you finally decided to work for me, I'd love to introduce you to the team. You have to start somewhere." Lisa nodded and followed her into the kitchen, where her mother-in-law had invited all the employees. Once in the main house of the cafe, as in any other place, she was saddened by the dull interior. Not to say she had the professional skills of a designer, but not gloomy. And even the incongruity at some points was just conspicuous. And that said that the hostess had no taste at all. But at the same time, her home was in perfect order. And in this regard, I wondered if she valued the reputation of the cafe at all. After all, everything starts in the kitchen. But Lisa decided not to say it out loud, so as not to incur the unjustified wrath of her mother-in-law. Today was to be her first day of work, after all. It was not enough for them to quarrel over nothing and then become blood enemies for the rest of their lives. Lisa couldn't afford that. All the more so because she had promised her husband to hold out for at least a week. For some reason, he decided to conduct an experiment and check other versions of the problems. Well, here are all my subordinates. You will work with them. The mother-in-law pointed to the crowd of young people. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa. I'm here to apply for a waitress position. If you'd like to join your team, I'd appreciate it. Join us. We'll all make money together. Answered one of the girls. My name is Christina, and I'm also a waitress. That's great. I already have a date. Will you be interning with her? Camille said, looking contentedly at Christina. And make sure the customers are always happy. Otherwise, you will not make money on them, and I on you and double the amount. That's right, Camille, the subordinate said with glee. Now get back to your workplace. There's nothing to crowd here. The employees began to come out of the kitchen one by one, extending their hands to Lisa and calling her name. She nodded in response, but she couldn't remember half of them. Christina looked at her with a smile and said cheerfully, "Don't even try." I could tell from your pensive look that you were mumbling their names to yourself. You shouldn't do that at work. You'll know everyone's face before you know it. It's hard at first, but then you'll get the hang of it. Thanks for the encouragement. I hope I learn quickly. I don't want to spend the whole internship on the bench, Lisa joked. And Christina took her humor to heart. It's not soccer, but you'll have to run too. And most importantly, without letting yourself get hurt. In a way, does anyone fight here? No, very rarely. However, there are customers who cling to beautiful waiters. They can pinch the soft spot and pull my arm. With me, such numbers do not pass, and I quickly put in place. And after that, the man comes to his senses for a long time. But this is categorically not to do. Shook her head Christina. We already have 2 girls because of such tricks left without a job. Camille believes that the customer is always right. Well, let her comfort herself. Or does she turn on her heel? I don't want any clients like that. And I'm not gonna let you get your hands dirty. Your business. And I told you, if you want my opinion, you won't last long with that kind of attitude. We'll look proudly in the mirror. Lisa. As they say, the eyes fear the hands. Confidence that she will succeed. Christina surprised me. After all, she came to the conclusion that it would not run away on the first day. But no, it didn't. And Lisa even managed to earn her first tip from a generous client. They, of course, were much less than the rest of the staff, but still pleasantly pleased. It was her first day and a small bonus. Praised her mother-in-law, appearing in the hall just before closing time. If you keep this up, you'll soon be earning more than your husband. Camille almost hesitated at the last word. Apparently, she wanted to say more than my son. But she realized it in time. She looked around and said the best possible thing. Lisa didn't correct her to avoid embarrassment. Otherwise, it would have been a disagreement. Thank you for your kind words, but it's better the other way around. She thanked her mother-in-law and left the cafe. It's up to you. But the career path is still on the table. Do you want a ride, or are you taking public transportation? The bus, Camille, the bus. It's more convenient for me. Okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow. She waved goodbye and added, William, say hi and thank you for your help. I will. After getting into the car, the mother-in-law turned around, put on the gas, and drove towards the center. Lisa waited for her bus at the bus stop and went home too. As soon as she crossed the threshold of the apartment, she was immediately picked up by her beloved husband. And how was your first day on the job, okay? I'd give it a solid B. Lisa winked at him. Okay. What did you take 1 point off for? Frowned his eyebrows for molesting their customers. 2 of them even tried to touch me. I should have told my mother. She would have sent them away. That's just it. She wouldn't have sent them away. Lisa answered evasively and shook her head. Why not? Because, in her opinion, The customer is always right, no matter what he does. That is, he can appeal to the waitresses. Angry? Asked William. It turns out it is, especially since they're used to it. Lisa shrugged. It's awful. You shouldn't have gone there in the first place. How's it going with you? Did you find out anything? Not yet, but when I was doing a remote report on my mom's computer, I noticed a folder with a password. It had an interesting name, X-Day. What does it mean? I'm not sure, but I'm guessing it holds something important. Best not to touch it. You'll end up getting blamed for it, she told him. That's what I thought. But you should be careful too. William kissed her on the cheek and took her into the kitchen. It turned out that he had prepared a romantic dinner for them to coincide with her first day at work. Lisa blushed and kissed him heartily on the lips, neck, and chin. In general, everywhere her lips reached. And this was the beginning of a stormy continuation of the emotional outburst. At the same time, ahead of them awaited a series of incredible events, which led to the long-awaited denouement. After all, they so zealously wanted to find out what was hiding in this cafe, and what skeleton was hidden in the closet under a heavy burden. Involuntarily triggered the mechanism of disclosure, the couple were horrified when the harsh truth was revealed. And on the surface surfaced not only personal problems, Camille, but also much more severe consequences. That's where the wave that almost swept them into the abyss came from. And only by a miracle did they manage to save themselves, by taking advantage of an unexpected offer from Lisa. Yes, she was the one who sacrificed part of her past to stop the wave, and she was hailed as a hero for her courageous act. But that X-Day, as William read in the folder, was still 5 whole days away. He continued to help his mother periodically, building up the business and bringing in more clients. Lisa, on the other hand, was gaining experience as a waitress, and I must say that she was even better at serving customers in the cafe than she was at selling things at the market, especially since there she had to sell it profitably to get a percentage from the owner. And here it was enough that she brought the order on time and smiled languidly. Men themselves reached into their wallets to pay a generous tip. Others were not stingy at all and laid out on the table without looking at the denomination of banknotes. It came to the point that they managed to earn a month's salary in one day. But not always, and not everyone was so lucky. Usually in the evening or on weekends, and the waiters took advantage of it. They were carefully prepared to serve their customers to the highest standards. Lisa didn't try to squeeze the last of the money out of a customer. If he tipped, she thanked him profusely. If not, she simply said thank you. Come back anytime. And after a while this information reached her mother-in-law. She didn't think much of it at first, and when such tricks began to happen on a regular basis, she decided to teach her daughter-in-law a lesson. She sent an invitation to the kitchen through Christina. Camille stood outside the door, holding a large stainless pot in her hand. What she was going to do with it remained a mystery for now. But as soon as Lisa entered the kitchen, her mother-in-law abruptly opened the lid and poured over her daughter-in-law's head the leftover food from the table, and then set the pot on the table. She looked at her squeamishly and said these words, "Don't dishonor my graying head." For what? Camille, with tears in her eyes, shouted Lisa. At the same time, Christina stood behind her back and smiled evilly. "That's for not wanting to work like everyone else." My mother-in-law smelled of booze. It was a sign that she'd taken a drink before she was tortured. If it's about the tips, you can collect them yourself. In fact, I don't want to stay here anymore. Well, that's good. You're free to go. We don't need your services anymore. Is that right? Yes, Camille. The staff replied with a chorus of cheers and drooped their heads. They clearly didn't have the courage to tell the landlady the truth to her face. But Lisa didn't expect a gesture of goodwill from them. She looked at the crowd as contemptuously as her mother-in-law and shook her head dejectedly. She simply felt sorry for the young people who had become dependent on an exploitative employer. She could stay and continue to grovel before this homegrown business lady. Lisa said goodbye. "What did you say?" Her mother-in-law furrowed her brow and tried to pounce on her with her fists. "Just try it. You are no longer my head of the housing department. I will put you in your place." "Well, Otter, I shouldn't have gotten involved with you." Slamming the door, the mother-in-law left the kitchen and went to her office. Lisa turned to Christina and said angrily, "And you will regret that he poisoned Camille on me. I know it was you who made her follow me, but you realize she's miffed." "Christina, I don't want to hear anything, and you'd better get out of my sight." The calm and poised Lisa had lost her temper, and that was a sure sign that she was really pissed off. Normally, she'd keep her emotions in check in these situations, but she just couldn't. And better now than never. Sooner or later, she was gonna have to show her character. Except it never got through to the people it was meant for. With their heads down, they left the kitchen, and in the meantime, Lisa cleaned herself up. She got rid of the remnants of her meal and rinsed her hair lightly under warm water, then hailed a cab and headed home to inform her husband of his mother's egregious antics. Upon seeing his wife's disheveled hair, William immediately realized there was trouble. "Calm down and tell me in order. What happened?" He put her on the sofa. He brought tea in a glass and made her make 2 goals. Period. It's just unthinkable. "Your mother humiliated me in front of everyone," cried Lisa. "All because of that damn tip. And what did she do? Just don't fall off the couch when you hear this." Lisa told him how she was first called into the kitchen and then had the leftovers poured over her head in front of everyone. And it was his own mother who had done the humiliating act. And she was under the influence of alcohol, and they mocked her squeamishly. The cafe staff stood and watched, unable to say anything to her. Now my mom had completely buried our relationship, and I honestly wanted it back. But I guess I'll just have to let it go. And most importantly, I'm sending her a gift. Make her happy. Maybe one last time before she loses her business. What are you talking about? With concern in your voice, Lisa asked, and even stopped crying. They say that's how the attendance will drop. That's all. William shrugged and winked at her. I see, but she'll have to make her own way. We agreed to help her, and in return we were humiliated again. In fact, William hadn't told his wife about the gift he'd sent her mother. The thing is, he managed to find the password to that encrypted folder and find out all the information it contained. To be honest, he even felt bad about what he read. However, William did not dare to sound the alarm because he realized his mother's cunning plan. She did not just want to register the cafe on him. She needed to get rid of a lot of problems, and first of all, somehow put the creditors on a false trail. She borrowed money from them for the promotion at a high interest rate, and all because the lenders turned out to be gangsters. They laundered money this way. But they did not even think of forgiving debts, regardless of the gender and age of the borrower. They didn't care who they beat the money out of, as long as they got their money back. Camille fell into a trap after William withdrew his support and also removed all his work from his computer. She began to have global problems. There were fewer and fewer visitors day by day. Profits were gradually declining. But X day, on the contrary, was approaching. And the less time there was left, the more anxious she became. Camille was worried sick, and when the bandits called and demanded to return the debt, she panicked and turned to her son again. But William wouldn't hear of it. "You're the one who ruined a good cause. We went out of our way to help you, and you took it upon yourself to humiliate my wife. Well, forgive me, you scoundrel. I'm ready to make amends." She wept in fear for her life. "Well, first I have to pay off my creditors. I realize you invited us here for a reason. You wanted to hang on to your debts to make our lives easier. I'm ashamed of what I've done, son. And this business, for crying out loud. And that low act in the kitchen. I could go on and on about my mistakes, but it's not gonna make me feel any better. I'm not making any promises. I'll talk to Lisa and call you back. In the meantime, can you sell your car? It's still not enough. But I'll wait, son. If you can think of something, I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life." William discussed the impending disaster looming over his mother with his wife, and she again agreed to help. Despite both being angry at her mother-in-law for publicly humiliating her, figuring out their options, they had raised a third of the amount needed in a few days. Together with the car, it was exactly half. They had to find the rest of the money for the loan. So Lisa suggested selling Grandma's house. It was her only reminder of her past. But after weighing up the pros and cons, she came to the conclusion that human life was more precious. William, of course, crushed, but also did not sit idly by. He himself approached the creditors and persuaded them to wait another month. In the end, during this time, they managed to sell Grandma's house. True, they had to lower the price to get cash at once, but there was nowhere to go. Camille's life was at stake. She caused problems, and they were solved by the whole neighborhood. Naturally, the cafe had to close because the money ran out. But the creditors were paid off and they got rid of her. What she experienced during this time could only be guessed. She didn't leave the house to go to the store and back. She was afraid that the bandits would chase her and send her to the other world. But it did not happen because William agreed with them. He assumed all obligations to repay the loan. His mother thanked them for a long time, especially Lisa for her miraculous rescue, and promised not to get into the business again. Moreover, she insisted that they move to live with her because they had to give all their savings to the creditors. On the other hand, this story became a lesson for them and a hint that one should be able to forgive. It is understandable that it is difficult to forget humiliation and meanness, but no one is immune to it. And when unforeseen circumstances arise, it's no time to be proud. And that's exactly what Lisa and William did. And they didn't regret it. They finally managed to find a common denominator and eliminate all the barriers. They had been in the way for a long time, but everything had its time. The moment of truth came when fate turned to them and helped them to find peace under one roof and in the circle of a large and friendly family.